difficulty seeing now. Of course, this is just an informal chat. We're only going to go live about 8 o'clock, so we're just talking to each other. And Jeff Lee, I don't know if you're able to see better now with the advert removed, the advert that said that we're going live at 8 o'clock. Let me unmute you there.
Howard, that's much better. I can see you. I can now see what you can see of me, so I can try and adjust to improve things on the iPad.
Cool, perfect.
See
Jeff,
that how's that one?
That's much better. You're looking good. You're sounding great. But let's ask you. Cool. And
awesome.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you as a banker a question, because
yes.
Are people proactively approaching you and say, look, we're going to have a problem? Or do people wait for the problems to mount up and for them to come to you, for you to come to them once the problem's too big?
I think it's a combination. We are certainly proactively communicating with all of our clients that are part of the payment relief program or qualify for the payment relief program. But we've still received, and I was just looking at the stats today in prep for this evening. Over the last 4 weeks, we've received 35,000 inbound telephone calls and 34,000 emails from customers querying payment relief, as well as, if you'll know, we've had a surprise interest rate reduction that I think caught us all off guard. And querying the impact of that, and so there's been widespread interest towards payment relief holidays, impact of interest, and interest reduction. So it's been a very, very, very active time for the banks over this last 4 weeks.
Well, it's fantastic to have someone from ABSA on the panel. You know, ABSA have been the partners of the Juice Report for, I think it's the last 18 years in the Juice Achiever Award. So it's really such a delight to have you on the panel tonight. And we're so happy that you'll be able to give so many people so much good advice tonight. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here.
Nice to have you. Hirsch, I'm going to ask you a question, if you don't mind, because you're one of the great doyens of the property industry. But is there a property industry at the moment?
Yeah, so Howie, that's the big question. In fact, one of our panelists was going to be an attorney, just talking about property transfers and what's going on under the lockdown. But in fact, at the moment, there isn't anything really to speak of in terms of transfer. So just from a classification point of view, the residential real estate industry has been classified into level 2. We're only unlocking to level 4. The timeline to get to level 3 and even level 2 is, you know, how long is a piece of string? So it's a very challenging time for the industry, and by implication the market as well. And we'll unpack some of that on the panel, because just simple things like at the moment, even under level 4 thus far, and I think Silva's going to allude to it a little bit later, is you can't move home. So irrespective of whether you want to move from where you're renting, whether you've bought and you're waiting for the office to reopen, as it stands now, and there have been various petitions from stakeholders, you can't move. So there are a whole host of different stakeholders at the moment that aren't operating, that are contributing to a market that has almost ground to a halt.
So in fact, you can't go see a house, you can't sell a house, you can't transfer a house at the moment, you can't even go look for a house, and you may not have a job to even pay the bond afterwards.
Yeah.
And
so, I mean,
and of course, people don't want you in their home to come even look at the house, even if you want to go see it.
Yes, I mean, we're trying not to take that personally, but correct, you know, and so it's a very complicated situation. Lots of moving parts. Interestingly, you know, during the last four or 5 weeks, we have had a number of buyers who have purchased homes subject to a viewing post unlocking. I think the degree to which we're being unlocked, or the limited degree, has probably caught everyone, I think, by surprise. I think everyone was anticipating a greater lockdown. So there are people out there, the buyers haven't gone away, but the ability to transact on a level 4 is very, very, very much diminished.
I'm sure that Helene at Orjet, where you mentor a lot of entrepreneurs, people must be coming to you at the moment with great problems in their business. What do you do with staff? Do you keep staff on during this period? I'm sure they're coming with so many questions. Are you in a position to answer them?
Well, each business is different, Howard. You know, they have to look at how many staff they have, how long their resources will last them to keep on paying staff. We always encourage people, if they can, to keep staff, because if you come back and you want to restart your business and you have to restaff your business, you know, you're looking at a second problem. You know, often staff are trained and they're a huge asset. They are your business. So it depends. It depends very much. We look at each one individually.
But how many people do you help through Orjet?
Well, we started 15 years ago. And I have to tell you that one of our founders, Paul Bacher, is actually sitting on the panel tonight. Hi, Paul. And I think we have, when we last looked, we looked at about just over 1,500 businesses between Cape Town and Johannesburg in 15 years, probably closer to 2,000.
Well, that's amazing. I see Paul Bacher has just disappeared for a moment. Dan, he's asking a question about hearing two conversations, maybe as two devices linked, or so maybe, Dan, you can actually help with that as we go along.
Yeah, so what's going on there, I think, is he's probably got YouTube open as well with the sound on.
Okay, cool. We'll sort that out. Hugh Reichelen, welcome to the panel. We're unmuting you. This is the second time you've been on a panel in less than a week. Last time you were giving us, in the amazing race, you looked after Lithuania for us. And tonight you're talking about the Rambam Trust.
Yeah, hello Howard, and hello my fellow panelists. Good to be with you. Yes, tonight I'm talking about the Rambam Charitable Trust. And we were established in 1995, and we give interest-free loans to members of the Jewish community in South Africa.
And is that just for businesses, or is that for individuals as well? I know you'll be running us through some of the details at 8 o'clock when we begin, but give us a 10-second sneak preview.
Well, it's essentially for individuals, but sometimes it's very difficult to make a distinction between the business and the individual themselves. So we would rather lend it to the director or the shareholder personally for their living expenses. But ultimately, you know, if their business is in trouble, then they'll get that loan.
Cool. Hugh, thanks. We look forward to hearing from you a little later. Larry, Dave, I'm going to unmute you because you are the labor expert. And I imagine you've been inundated. Do you represent the workers, or do you represent the employees, the employers, or both in your practice?
Primarily employers, but I do act for a very big union as well. So I do see both sides of the fence, so to speak.
And is it a bloodbath out there at the moment, or are we still safe?
You're safe for now. I think there is going to be some noise coming on the mining sector. That's brewing at the moment, unfortunately. In fact, there's a court matter tomorrow morning in the Labour Court to stop the mines from bringing everybody back in one go, because they're concerned about, or the union is concerned about the buses, how many people have been put on the buses and how people are going to be screened and tested. And you've got about 150 people who go down a mining shaft in a lift. And there's just some concerns around the protocols that have been put in place and whether they are good enough, because once you have a threat of that virus in that sector, it's a major problem from a spreading point of view. So there's a huge amount of concern by the union insofar as the health and safety of their members are concerned. And of course, it's opposed the matter, and it's happening tomorrow morning. So it'll be interesting to see what the outcome is. So I think that, plus there's going to be a number of restructuring and retrenchment exercises that are going to follow as a consequence in time as a result of the epidemic.
So Larry, just going back to the mining for a second. So when we move from phase 5 to phase 4, open cast mining can in fact have 100% of all employees working, and underground mining can go to 50%. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's my understanding. And there is there's a little bit of controversy around it because there's a lot of questions being asked for clarity and what exactly does that mean in terms of the amount of people who can attend their workplace at one time. How many people at one time? Because it's a complete, the situation prior to lockdown as opposed to now is a complete dichotomy. It's two completely different sets of dynamics that are at play, and you're dealing with an employer with thousands and thousands of employees. I mean, you've got in the gold sector, you've got 30,000 odd employees in the gold sector at Sibanye. You've got some 60,000 in the platinum belt. Those are big numbers. So that needs to be very carefully managed and controlled insofar as the virus is concerned.
So Larry, just to remind people, we're going live at 8 o'clock. There are currently about 300 logins, so close to 1,000 people watching us so far this evening. So we welcome everyone. We're just having an informal chat, and we will for the next 3 or 4 minutes, and then go live at 8 o'clock with all of our panelists. And one of the things that Dan Stillerman is doing is bringing everyone onto the panel so we can have an informal chat with him. And we certainly hope that Paul Bacher joins us. Hirsch, I don't know if there's anyone out there who else is on our panel that we're busy missing at the moment that we should be bringing on. But if so, please just let us know, and we'll make sure that they come in. David, there are a number of funds that are available for people to apply to at the moment. I hear that, in fact, the Rupert Fund is now closed. Is that correct?
Well, I've heard rumors to that effect, yes. I don't know it for a fact, but I heard about that some time ago, that some of the funds have already been closed for applications.
But
Yeah.
but just we'll go.
That fund has been closed.
Okay, but there are still a number of other funds. There's the Solidarity Fund, there's the Oppenheimer Fund, there's the Mary Oppenheimer and Daughter Fund, there's the Motsepe Fund. So
Yeah.
so it's not like there isn't still money available in some of these funds, and you'll be working
Yes,
together with Yaku through some of the processes and how people actually apply and what they are giving.
I'll be focusing more on the tax aspects and Yako on the TERS UIF benefit, but
okay, cool.
You know, insofar as the funds are concerned, the one that the government is going to remain open until the end of the tax year by the look of the announcement that was made today. So I think that'll be open, and you know, for a good time for further donations, and those will be also being incentivized up to 20% deduction and not 10% for that particular one, Solidarity.
Right. And Jeff, the banks are administering some of these funds on behalf of government. Is that correct? There's a 200 billion that's government set aside for the banks to be able to administer. Is that correct?
Yes, that's absolutely correct. We've also set up some of our own funds, ABSA Foundation, which a lot of our staff are donating. They're donating leave, which then gets encashed and that. So there are a number of funds that we are involved in. That's correct.
Fantastic. It's 2 minutes to 8. We'll be beginning the panel at 8 o'clock. And I just want to remind everyone who's watching us that if you look at the bottom of your screen, you'll see there are a few buttons that Zoom provides you with. The one button is a chat button. So if you'd like to comment, chat, speak to the panelists, speak to the other people who are watching, and currently we have about 1,200, 1,300 people busy watching us at the moment. If you would like to, in fact, chat to everyone, please use the chat functionality. But if you have a question specifically aimed at one of the panelists, then please use the Q&A functionality that you will see at the bottom of your screen. So just to repeat that, the Q&A is to ask a question to the panelists, and Dan and I will be monitoring that very carefully. If you just want to chat amongst yourselves or make comments as we go, and we often have thousands and thousands of comments that go during the course of an evening, then please just use the chat functionality that you have in front of you. And Hirsch, the time has just gone 8 o'clock. And I want to welcome everyone on behalf of the South African Jewish Report. This is in fact the 13th panel that we at the Jewish Report have hosted since the start of lockdown. And at the beginning of the lockdown, we really made a commitment, the board of the Jewish Report, 2 commitments. One, to keep on publishing the newspaper despite what was happening, despite the fact that we couldn't really bring people into the office. But we wanted to distribute the newspaper, we wanted to publish, we wanted to print, and we said we would take it through to people's homes at enormous, enormous cost. But we were determined to make sure that the newspaper got out to our community. The second thing that we said is we are going to set up a bunch of panels. And I just, as Dan removes everyone off the screen, I just want to play you a little video because like every other organization around at the moment, the Jewish Report is absolutely not immune from what is happening around us as well. And I want to play you this little video because to be able to keep these panels going, to be able to make sure that the staff of the Jewish Report continue to publish the newspaper, we really need your help.
Hi, I'm Howard Saxton, Chairman of the South African Jewish Report. And we at the Jewish Report believe that Jewish organizations would be made or broken by how they serve their community during this impossibly difficult time. Our first decision was to continue to publish and to deliver newspapers not just to shops, but to people's townhouses and apartment blocks as well. Because feeling part of a community is one of the greatest services we could ever deliver to the Jews of South Africa. Our second decision was to create a platform for information, education and entertainment for the entire Jewish community and for South Africa as a whole. Over the past few weeks, we have created Zoom panels that have attracted tens of thousands of viewers. Some of the best healthcare specialists in South Africa gave practical advice on how to stay safe during Corona. Psychologists taught people how to stay sane, and wellness experts made sure that our minds and bodies were kept fit and healthy. One of the things we are most proud of is how we have highlighted the work done by so many Jews and Jewish organizations in feeding the needy and producing masks for both our own community as well as the townships. But now we at the Jewish Report face our own challenges to survive as advertising dries up. And so we are appealing to you. If you are one of our 55,000 readers, or if you are amongst the tens of thousands of people who have enjoyed our Zoom panels, now we at the Jewish Report are asking for your support. Please give generously to us so we can continue to publish and continue to serve you in this remarkable fashion.
I know at the end of all of that, we always get a request from people who would just like to see either the Zapper details again, or alternatively, if not the Zapper details, the wallet doc. So I'm just going to put it back onto the screen for one moment for people who would like to make a contribution to the Jewish Report for everything that we've been doing for our community. We have both a wallet doc payment system as well as Zapper. So please feel free, or alternatively, send a WhatsApp through to myself or an email through to Dan, and just ask us for our banking details and we'll absolutely get them to you. And we really thank you really for all the people who've supported us through this process. We couldn't be able to serve our community without all of your assistance. So with that, I want to thank Dan Stillerman. Every time we bring him on, we thank him again, because none of this could ever happen without him. We've called him a saint, we've called him a mensch, we've called him so many good things that his head is expanding rapidly, because really, he has done such a great service to our community. He has given of his time, he's given of his platform. He's the one who sends you those emails. He's the one who forces me to spam you with WhatsApps. But without him, none of this could ever have taken place. So Dan, thank you once again. You're giving up another day and another night in order to serve our community and to help inform and educate people during this enormously
Thanks,
difficult.
Howie. 100%. My pleasure.
So thank you. And Herschel, we have an enormously impressive panel tonight. Hirsch, you're a director of the Jewish Report. People know you because there are Javits signs all over the streets of Johannesburg and Cape Town and Bloemfontein. And the Javits name has been synonymous with the property industry for 2 generations now. Is that correct?
Yeah, Howie, we celebrated our 50th anniversary last year. So it's 51 years. And I think my dad started this in 1969, which I think the global economy faced not quite for the same reasons, but similar woes. So it's kind of ironic that I'm here talking about this global pandemic and the economic impact tonight, 50 years later.
Well, these are tough times for that industry, but they're tough times for many, many industries. And so we want to welcome, now we have over 2,000 people watching us already this evening. We want to welcome you all on behalf of the Jewish Report. And we want to thank Herschel for putting together such an illustrious and important panel tonight. I think so many people are struggling financially through these difficult times, but there is hope and there is light. And it's important to be able to grab those nuggets outside or out of what we're doing. So Hirsch, I hand over very much to you.
Thanks so much, Howard. And I think just to you specifically, you spent a lot of time thanking everyone else. And I think to you for driving the Jewish Report, driving these initiatives together with our board, who've done a fantastic job of bringing the community all this amazing information. And once again to Dan. And so we're going to kick off and maybe just some observations, because we've got a fantastic panelist. I see Alon has just joined us on the panel. The format is going to be, we've got different segments, and so we're going to chat to our panelists. There's going to be an opportunity for Q&A as we're going along. And then at the end of the panel, around about 9:30 as well, we're hoping all of our panelists will be on to answer general questions. And I think tonight is really about a couple of things. And I think globally, there has been this debate, and there's no doubt and especially we talk about it in the Jewish religion, that the sanctity of life, and nothing can be more important than the sanctity of life. But there is no doubt that globally and South Africa, the debate is there around at what cost to the economy and what cost to people's livelihoods, and the toll that it's going to take not only in the next month or two, but potentially for years to come. And so tonight, interestingly, that we're squeezed in between, I think in day 33 of our lockdown, we're squeezed in between Freedom Day and Workers' Day. And had I asked all of you maybe 2 or 3 months ago about your freedoms to go and come and spend time with your families and go to work, and about your work and your careers and looking to the future, I think our answers 3 months ago would have been very different to what they are today, just around our freedoms and the impact that it's having on our working lives. And tonight, hopefully, we'll unpack. We've got some fantastic panelists who are going to give you some really on-the-ground, take-home information that you can use to survive, whether you're an individual or a panelist. And I think we're kicking off tonight, firstly, with Alon Reis. So Alon, welcome, who is the founder of Reis Corp. And Alon, I noted on your website, you don't call yourself an incubator, but you call yourself a prosperator. And you make no bones about the fact that this is about for-profit and taking businesses from where they are in their various stages to profits or more profits. And we suddenly find ourselves in an environment where maybe the thinking has moved not from profit to survival. And so just to start off, in terms of the businesses that you're working with, how challenging and how tough is it out there at the moment? think we may just need to Alon, you may need to just unmute yourself there, bottom left of your screen.
Right, so thanks, Herschel, and to everyone involved in putting this together. Herschel, for me, you know, I've been working with entrepreneurs for 20 years. We've had 13,000 businesses through Race Corp over the 20 years. We've got 500 right now. And the quick answer is that it's a mixed bag. Some guys are doing incredibly well, and some businesses are doing really, really badly. But within that, there is actually quite an interesting split. For me, it's their attitude and what their lens is on the world. So I don't think anyone here thinks that this is a wonderful thing to happen, but there are those who have put on an opportunistic lens and are looking for the opportunity in all of this, and the others are becoming defensive. So instead of breaking this down into those who are doing well and those who are doing badly, I think for me, a better model to look at it right now is who's defensive and who's aggressive, who's opportunistic and who is in the corner quivering. And so what I've seen now is a huge amount of creativity, and we've got a lot of cliched things that are happening. People are going into sanitizer and face masks and all those kind of things. But there's also a lot of other more creative things that are coming out of this. So you see a business like a plumbing business, which is very much a hands-on, if there's a leak, I have to be there, fix the leak and sort out the plumbing. I've seen one of our businesses now turn a plumbing business into an online education business where he's teaching people how to plumb. He's got 167,000 subscribers to his channel on YouTube in the last month. You've seen other businesses do all sorts of incredible things to actually look for the opportunity. So for me, the first thing that I suggest that people do is get what I call rational quickly. We've seen all the denial. We've seen then people go to blame, then the hopelessness, and now we have to get to rational. This is true. It's happening. This is going to have an impact for at least 18 months to come, at least. It's going to change the world forever. It's going to change the psyche of people forever. So let's deal with that and now see what we can do with that.
Let's take, so as you say, I mean, there some of your clients that are thriving, and that just may be because that business is able to perform despite the lockdowns. But for businesses who just simply can't operate for whatever level of restriction, where do they even start? So you see this massive drop-off in business, you see orders suddenly declining, you see cash flow drying up. What do they need to do to start? So before you can even get to trying to reinvent your business, you know, potentially you've got to save your business, or at least try and stabilize it to create some space to think about turning it into an online plumbing advice business. Where do you start?
So I think you have to break this down into three levels. The one is the first level, which is the chaos level, which we are still towards the end of. The second level for me is the crystallize, where islands of opportunity start to appear. And the third is the certainty, the predictable certainty that you're looking for. So depending where we are in the journey, and we're now in let's call it the stage one of that, you have to do different things. So right now, it's about save money, how do I make money instant, and how do I protect what I have? And we see that with people that are doing that. It becomes very much around the now. And everything that you've heard from everyone, you know, I don't want to repeat, save cash, you know, make as much money, release as much of your balance sheet that you can to create cash, whatever, all those things are pretty cliched. And I think there's nothing more that I can add in there right now. But you've got to be able to find means to hold your breath to the second level. And the second level is when things start to crystallize and patterns start to form and new opportunities start to present. In the first phase, you've got a commodity like oil at a negative, I think went to the minus $37.10. I mean, if you told your grandfather that somebody would pay you to take away their oil, he would look to see how much you've been drinking. So to me, the whole world, everything's dislocated. All the rules are dislocated. We have to get through to the second phase, which is this island, and then it's about timing. If you step onto this volcanic island a little too early, you might burn yourself. If you step onto this volcanic island a little too late, it might be occupied. So now you're watching for patterns and watching for opportunity. So for me, what you do now, coming back to what you've got to do in practically, is you've got to set yourself up and ask yourself, I have to last till phase 2. And in phase 2, who's the new who? Who's the new client in phase 2? What is the new how? In other words, what's the new product what's the new what? What's the new product? What's the new how? What are the new processes that I have to do? What's the new where? What's the new distribution channel that I have to look at? And then you start to reconstruct your business. Now, I'm very pragmatic and very practical. Some businesses are not going to be able to hold their breath that long. But if there are ways to release a balance sheet, some of your balance sheet, or borrow money in this time, knowing where you're going to land in part 2, to me, that's what you're going to do. So when we're working with businesses, all we're doing is reconstructing their models. I want to just maybe just make a last point before.
Let me just ask you. So when you say just release your balance sheet, give us some practical examples of how you would release your balance sheet.
So you've got assets on your balance sheet. You've got a property. You've got a certain stock. So to me, it's about cash flow versus profit. That to me is the big change right now, because you have to hold your breath to phase 2. So that to me, the rules changed. Before this, it was about profit. Right now, it's about cash flow. So releasing your balance sheet for cash to now to be able to hold your breath a little longer until you get to phase 2, until you get to find those islands of opportunity is important. And whether that's your own balance sheet or through your network, other people's balance sheets in your family or whatever the case may be, people have got a broader view of what their balance sheet is right now. And to me, the other thing, I just want to bring in a point here. Marikana happened many years ago, and we got a force majeure letter from one of the mines during Marikana, and we were supporting 25 entrepreneurs at that point. We released them from their mindset that they had to deliver in Rustenburg. They started delivering service around the country, and those businesses went from a state of mind of losing money to a 41% growth in revenue in 6 months and 12% increase in employment. And that was just a function of saying, I'm not geographically bound anymore. The world is my oyster. And so what we've done with many of our businesses, I've said to the entrepreneurs, change your company name to whatever your company name is and add the word international after that. You've got to change your mindset about who your market is right now. And with a rand dollar, it's 1850 or 1870, whatever it is today, that is a huge opportunity for us to be exporting skills. So I'll give you a practical example. An accounting business that we're involved in is now providing accounting services in the UK. That wasn't even viable 2 months ago.
So talk to me. So you've got through the chaos stage. You've released balance sheet. You've stabilized, as you say. And they say in golf, I think turnover is for show and putting's for dough. And you've kind of stabilized. So how do you sit down and have a look at how you can rejig your business? How do you look at what your core competencies were and what they can become? How do you go through that process?
I'm glad you brought up core competency, because for me, always in a time prior to COVID, there was this concept of, you had 2 schools of thought. You had the opportunists and you had the strategists. And the strategists spoke about core competency, that I have to use my core competency. And the reconciliation of that was a strategic opportunist. In other words, I use my core competencies in an opportunistic way. today, we have to do that, plus one other thing. You have to look at your verticals. So to me, it's also about, if you've got clients, the most precious thing right now is what my client. And the question is, what else can I sell to that client? It's not that I used to sell a certain thing to that client, is what else can I send to the client? So now the focus is not on core competency, what you have. The focus is now on the fact that the most precious thing I have is the client. And now I start listening to our clients. So what we've done, just as an interesting thing, we've got a term called MFCs, which is the middle finger club. We store all the people who tell us to get lost, okay, in a list called the MFC list. We have gone back to the MFC list, okay, and we have asked all our people who've told us to get lost if they need us now. And we've picked up millions of rands of work over the last couple of weeks now, in terms of people who had previously told us to get lost because the rules have changed and the clients who were supplying them now can't supply and we can. And so you've got to think more broadly. It's about the client now, not about just core competence.
Herschel, may I come in? There have been quite a few questions that are coming in. Just to remind people that if you have a question for the panel, please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your page. That's the first thing. If you just want to chat, use the chat functionality, but the Q&A section is for questions through to the panel. We'll also be posting a whole lot of polls right throughout the evening. So our first poll is in fact up. We're asking people what is the status of their employment. You'll see the results. We'll keep the polls up for about 30 seconds. And we've asked people who are watching us whether they're in full-time employee, part-time employee, recently retrenched, if they're professionals, etc. So we'll be asking these polls. We've probably got about 10 or 15 polls to ask throughout the entire evening, and you'll see the results.
All of them are anonymous.
All anonymous, absolutely. So no one will know how you're voting. So please make use of that. And our first poll has just ended. But can I, coming from the floor, from people who've asked questions, can I pose the first two questions that have come in? The first question is, besides for masks and sanitizers, Alon, where else have you seen people really able to take advantage of the opportunities there? That's question number one. And question number two says they went to FNB for an interest-free loan and they were asked to sign personal surety on that loan, which has just added to all of their stress. Is that something that you see on a regular basis?
I think personal surety today I think personal surety has always been part of the reality of small businesses. It's about the people who are investing or lending you money, making sure that you sleep equally uncomfortably as they do when you've got their money. So I don't think that's changed, and that to me will be still part of the equation, even more so going into the future. In terms of where new opportunities lie, I think the answer is, I sound like a politician, it depends. It depends on your particular industry. What I've seen in different businesses that we're involved in, they're seeing completely different opportunities. So I spoke about the accounting business, international. We've got a business that does online education. That business is quadrupled in size, but it's not just thinking about here. It's picked up it's basically gone overseas to other markets where they know that there is the same issue. They would never have done that before. And what I'm saying to all the entrepreneurs is you cannot have the same mindset that you had before. This is not about the fact that my clients aren't buying from me. The fact is that who else could be buying from you? That is the question. What do you have that other people want? Or what do your clients have? That's the core competency. Or what do your clients want that you can either do one of two things? Either you can be a producer of value or an arbitrager of value. So before you might have manufactured something. So you manufactured hand sanitizer. Now you can arbitrage it as well. So you can do both things now. So your two models in terms of servicing that client now increase your capability of serving more clients.
Thanks. Sorry, Howie, I lost signal there. I see we've just got we're bringing up our first survey for our viewers. How do you feel about your job or your business? So you need to tick 1, and we'll be posting the results. I'm worried about the future of my job or business. It will come right as soon as things return to normal. I think we'll be okay, but things will be different. I see huge business opportunities for me and my business, which I guess, Alon, you're referring to.
So I can tell you, Hirsch, we'll end the poll in another few seconds, but okay. I can tell you that 45% of people are currently worried about the future of their jobs or their business, and only 10% believe that things will come right as soon as things return to normal. We'll share those poll results now with the audience.
Alon, just two quick more points, and I think we've probably got a couple of questions. I know how is monitoring. Number one, and once again, you know, the positive spin, but as Howard said, I think so many people are so concerned that chaos mindset. Talk to me about, talk to me about the tough decisions. What are the tough decisions you've got to make to get through that chaos in order to be able to even start to think about what the opportunities, because as I say to the people in my company, you know, hope is not a strategy. To hope things are going to get better, to hope the economy is going to revive. And in fact, you know, people keep saying I can't wait for things to return to normal, but I don't think we're ever returning to normal. So how do you, what are the tough things you've got to face up to in that chaos phase of your business?
So Herschel, I agree with you, first of all, that I don't think it's ever going to, there's going to be the new normal. What is the new normal? So the tough things, of course, right now is around employment, and Larry Dave will know this more than most, is that people now need to make decisions about who they keep and who they don't. But now you've got to make the tough decision about present and future, because if I cut them now and things turn, then I basically have got no resource in order to take advantage of the opportunity of the future. So it's about now and future. It's about looking after yourself, i.e. your business, and being compassionate to the individuals. So you've got this matrix, these four things in this matrix that you have to navigate to make these tough decisions. The second thing is where you spend your time on. And I found that now I've become far more vigilant about wasting time on things that I know are going to take a long time, that I might invest into the future. It's really more about present. So that actually happened today. I had an RFP. It's a big RFP, but I know that it will only come out in a year's time if it happens at all. So I multiply my probability of getting it by the amount of time I have to spend on it, versus I'd rather take that time and spend it on something else. So where are you spending your time? And to me, the place to spend your time is talking to clients. That is 80% of your time now needs to be talking to clients and listening for other opportunity. Another tough decision right now is about salaries. You know, for me, it's a rough thing. I don't think anyone wants to do it, but this is about cutting salaries, whether you're doing it 50, 30, 40, 20%, as long as you follow the right process, and you can speak to Larry Dave about that, but follow the right process. Then do that. It's also about temporarily letting people off for 1, 2, 3 months. You have to follow a process, but that's another opportunity for you. So there's a lot of options actually available to you in order to reduce your overhead. And of course, you know, just talking to an entrepreneur right now, I've gone to, in terms of budgets, you've got to be brutal around your budgets. Brutal. Do we need that? And ask the question 3 times. Do I need it? Do I need it? Why? And why is that? And then get somebody else to ask the questions. We've cut our budgets, our internal budgets, by about 27% internally in terms of our costs in each department, because we've just been brutal. And we were efficient. We thought we were efficient before. So this is also about cutting budgets as well.
Fantastic, Alon. So listen, I mean, 2 key messages there. I think there are opportunities. A lot of it comes to mindset, but I think that starting point, as you just alluded to, you've got to be brutal about your business, and to get to that chaos, to get through that chaos part of it, so that you can think about the future. There's some really, really tough decisions to make, and a lot of those are, as you say, around cutting costs and preserving cash. Alon, thanks very much for your contribution. Hopefully you'll stick around, because I see there were a couple of questions. Someone was asking what are the criteria for you to take them on as a business. I hope you'll stick around, and we'll get to those questions later on in the panel. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Our next two panelists are Hugh Reichlin and Jeff Lee. Jeff is the managing executive for ABSA Home Loans, and as Howard said, ABSA has been a proud sponsor of the ABSA Jewish Achiever Awards for so many years, and a great partner of ours. So Jeff, if you could just unmute yourself, bottom left of your screen. Fantastic to have you with us, and thanks for taking the time. I'm sure many of you are familiar with Hugh Reichlin, who's an attorney, but he is also I think you were a trustee on the Rambam Trust. And so Jeff, I'm gonna start with you. You know, part of the fear and the concern and the anxiety we're seeing out there is simply, is my job safe? Is my business safe? And as a result of that, you know, how am I going to meet my debt obligations, whether it be a mortgage, whether it be my credit cards, my car funding, and what do I do? So I guess the first question I want to ask you is, have you seen a massive jump in the number of people now who are approaching you about the various options in terms of restructuring their debt?
So good evening, Herschel, and good evening to everyone that's zoomed in for this session this evening. And thank you very much for having me, and to Howard and the team at Jewish Report. I think, you know, to open with, I think we've got to accept that the situation or the crisis we find ourselves in at the moment is an existential one. It is one that's impacting the operations of the bank. It's impacting the operations of our customers. I think also the rapid onset that this crisis has come about, and how quickly it's come about, and how deeply it's gone at such a rapid rate, has also taken a number of us, not all of us, quite by surprise. I think this is also a market-wide liquidity crisis, but it can very quickly become a solvency crisis if we don't do the right things. Many of what Alon has alluded to beforehand, and it was very interesting listening to him, because this type of stress that we're seeing has never been modeled before. We can talk about a 1 in 25 stress, which might take us back to 2008, 2009. But if you actually look at some of the measures that we look at every single day in the bank, the number of customers that are contacting us for payment relief programs, this is way beyond 2008. And we're almost going back to a 1 in 50 event, which could be taking us back to the sanctions. And if you track something simple like the house price index or the house price inflation, 2008, I think we saw a slight dip in real terms, but in the 1980s was when there was a significant dip in the house price index. Your dad will probably remember that well, Herschel. And that's probably the era we're looking at. So when we look at the number of defaults, the number of customers that are contacting us, it is significantly larger than anything we've seen in recent history.
So Jeff, you've spoken about it. I mean, this is a 1 in 50. So, you know, there's a good chance that the people who experience the 50 probably got homes that have paid off, you know, might have been retired. Obviously, different issues affecting their retirement. But for many of us, we've never seen something like this. So what do people do? Let's assume you've had a salary cut. Let's assume you've been retrenched. You've got a mortgage payment. You've got a car payment. You've got other debt payments. Where do you start? In fact, do you even go to your banks before these things in anticipation of? What do you do? What are the practical tips that our listeners should be thinking about?
I think first and foremost, you must absolutely be honest with yourself. I think to your earlier point, hope is not a strategy. I think you've got to identify your current situation very, very quickly. You've got to take a quick look at your own liquidity and your own solvency, your balance sheet, the strength of your balance sheet, and you've got to make some very, very quick decisions. Making broad-based decisions now lead to broad-based unintended consequences. You've got to be very deliberate in your approach and in your actions. And you've got to, in those circumstances, you've got to speak to your bank sooner rather than later. Speak to your credit provider, whether it be the bank or be some other form of credit provider. Speak to them earlier, understand what they are offering in the way of payment relief programs, emergency loans, many other types of programs that they might be rolling out. And but most first and foremost, be very, very honest with yourself.
Jeff, so let's assume someone has had their salary reduced. Simply what they're bringing in is not going to make ends meet. They've got to feed their family. I guess they've got to pay for education. They come to the bank. They come to ABSA or any other banks. I know that in this case, I know the banks are collectively looking at not necessarily joint strategies, but have adopted a common view in some respects. What are their options? Let's look at a mortgage. So what are their options if they think they're not going to be able to meet their mortgage repayments for a period of time? What are the options available to them, or potentially?
So there are basically three options that are available to a customer at this time. The first one is a very new option that's come onto the market, which is around generally a 3-month payment relief that provides the customer with the liquidity back into their pocket for 3 months of their mortgage payments. That has a lot more benefits to the customer, and from an accounting perspective, from the bank's perspective, the South African Reserve Bank has provided various waivers and dispensations in terms of the accounting rules in relation to those payment relief programs, and I encourage customers to take those up. If, however, you've sat down and you're more honest with yourself and you've said, this is actually a protracted stress, I need something more than 3 months. Most banks, and I can speak definitely on behalf of ABSA, will have either a short-term plan or a long-term plan. And the short-term plan can be about restructuring the loan, reducing interest rates, or lengthening terms to enable you to recover over either a short-term plan, which can be up to 12 months, or a long-term plan, which can be a little bit longer. So those are basically the three programs that most banks are rolling out at this moment in time.
So if you let's assume someone comes and asks you for a deferment of their mortgage, capital and interest for a period of 3 months, I guess people have asked, there is interest still accumulating on what you're not paying. So the actual gross value of the outstanding loan is going to go up. And if the period is not extended, your catch-up payments are also going to increase. So you can't only look now, you've got to be forward-looking as well.
I think that's a very vital point. So the bank's primary purpose is to protect depositors. So by taking depositors' money and on lending it to people that need loans, it's important that we are able to recover those loans so that we can protect our depositors. So interest is not essentially is something that has to continue accruing in order for us to maintain that equilibrium. Extending the term.
Sorry, Jeff, there's a question of clarity that's just come in from the audience. They want to know, is it only interest that's deferred, or is it interest and capital that's deferred during this loan holiday?
So it's your interest and your capital, your entire installment, which is made up of interest and capital, is deferred for a period of 3 months.
Okay, so you can get both, and I see we've just got a survey coming up over the next few months. Are you likely to speak to a bank about deferring a mortgage or other payment in the coming months? I already have. I probably will, or probably not. We'll get those answers up. So Jeff, the answer to that question is you can get both your interest and your capital deferred.
Yes, it's very important to note that your installment will be deferred, which could include as well your if you have your insurance capitalized to your mortgage bond, your homeowner's comprehensive insurance, that can also be deferred, and you will not lose the benefit of that cover should a catastrophic event happen. But just coming back to your earlier point, Herschel, so lengthening the term is certainly one way of making sure that you that once you resume normal payment, your payments don't have to go up, all things being equal, and interest rates remain the same. But if you are able to increase your payment post resuming normal payments, that is something that would absolutely be encouraged, because your cost of debt over the life of your loan would then be less.
Jeff, just two quick questions. Number one, I see there are a lot of questions popping up around people who unfortunately don't bank at ABSA, but just are all of the major retail banks offering similar style support?
So they're all offering some form of relief. I mean, I think if I speak on behalf of ABSA, ours is a very comprehensive package. There are no income brackets that it relates. It is available to all of our customers that qualify for it. I think other banks have put some income level caps on. I think FNB has an emergency loan that they're offering rather than a payment relief. I think the most important thing is absolutely do your homework, find out what your bank has to offer, and speak to them about about all the implications of the payment relief or the emergency loan program that they have that they're offering.
And I see our previous panel, so probably I think nearly 50% of people either have or considering approaching their bank for some sort of debt relief, which is interesting. And I'm just having a look here. So roughly 30% of people are saying they're going to pay in full, but close to 40% are having to speak to landlords about making necessary arrangements. Jeff, last question before we move to Hugh. So, you know, we've got these two massive interest rate cuts in terms of the impact on consumers. I think for every R1 million worth of bonded plus minus prime, your payments have come down by about 650 Rand per month. It's a big difference. Has ABSA got a view on whether there's scope for further interest rate cuts in the coming months?
So, I mean, I think the last cut, I think, caught us all by surprise when the governor brought May's meeting forward. I think there's definitely room for more cuts. We calling for a fairly stable interest rate environment going forward, nothing too dramatic. But I think there is scope for more cuts should the governor think so. I think our inflation is well under control, which is their mandate. And I think if they do want to put more stimulus back into the economy, that is definitely a tool that they have at their disposal.
Thanks, Jeff. Listen, we'd love you to stay on. I see there are a lot of questions popping up. I want to move across to Hugh, who is a trustee for the Rambam Trust, one of the many community-based organizations at the forefront of supporting the Jewish community. Hugh, great to see you, and thanks for joining the panel. Tell me once again, are we seeing an increase in applications to the Rambam Trust, number one, and talk to us about what the trust does and what kind of funding do they offer to who?
So first of all, Herschel, just to say good evening to all our listeners and to yourself and to Howard and to Dan, to compliment you and the South African Jewish Report for these incredible seminars that you've been doing. And for the incredible work that the Jewish Report does. We salute you. And also, as the Rambam Trust, we thank you for the opportunity of being on this particular show.
It's a pleasure.
Herschel, you know, when you started, I was very moved by your anecdote about your father having started the business in Jarvis Properties in 69, and that you've been going for 50 years, and your dad started in a tough time, and here you are 50 years later in a tough time, which really speaks to the cyclical nature of business and life. And the Rambam has been going for 25 years. We started in 1995, which was a year after Mandela was released, and it was still a euphoric period where there was great optimism in the country. And in the 25 years that we've been around, we came upon the 2008 financial collapse across the world. There were the 10 disastrous years under Zuma. And now we've got the coronavirus, which hits us 25 years later. And it's very interesting that when we started the trust, there were 5 people that each put in 500 Rand. So we had a capital base of 2,500 Rand. And the sentiment at that stage was that there were a lot of people coming from overseas fundraising for overseas organizations. And we felt, and in a sense it was prophetic, we felt that there was going to be a great need in South Africa, and we needed our money to remain on shore. And here we are 25 years later, where we were able to unlock R1 million in the last 3 weeks to provide interest-free loans for people in the community as an emergency measure, which to me is something quite astounding.
Amazing, absolutely amazing.
Essentially, having started in 95, we've increased that capital base from 2,500 Rand to 15 million Rand. We have 20 trustees. We've got 17 in Johannesburg, and we've got 3 in Cape Town. And we're constantly doing fundraisers. We have an annual golf day, which attracts wonderful people from the community who really give generously. We've had all sorts of events. We've had a breakfast with Nelson Mandela. We had a breakfast with Cathy O'Dowd that climbed Everest. We've used all these opportunities. And we're always approaching donors in the community, people of high net worth individuals, etc. And we've got people contributing on a monthly basis. So we've built it up to 15 million Rand. And thank God, in the time of the trust, we've done 163 million Rand of interest-free loans to members of the Jewish community across the country. We have an office in Sandringham, and I refer everybody to our website. It's www.rambam.co.za. And essentially, Rambam is an acronym for Rabbi Maimonides, who said that the highest level of charity is when you give somebody an interest-free loan, because it's not a handout. He has to pay it back.
So Hugh, let me ask you, just because I know time is a little short. So just we've got someone. Let's assume someone now is struggling financially, may have had their hours reduced, half work, half hours, half pay, no work, no pay. What could they come to you for? So is it for they can't pay their children's education? Could it be their mortgage? I know you mentioned that blurring of lines for sole proprietors around work, but what could they come to you for, and what do you look at in terms of the criteria when granting a loan from the trust?
Well, that's exactly the point that I was coming to when the Rambam says to support a person before he falls. So essentially, people come to us for when their backs are against the wall and they no longer are able to obtain credit from the normal credit sources like the banks. So people come to us where they have debt, credit card debt, and we would pay that money directly into their credit card. As a rule, our normal loans are about 50,000 Rand, and we like to pay those directly to the service providers. So for example, school fees at the beginning of the year, people can't put their kids into school without securing the school fees, or they fall into arrears with the school. We'd pay the school fees. We pay for credit cards. People have weddings, simchas as we call it. When people have, as we've said now, crises in their business, where there is a blurring between the business and the individual, we would lend the individual the money, even though we know that it's propping up the business. Now, for the COVID...
Yeah, keep going. So keep going. Yeah.
So we created an emergency fund, and we set aside R1 million of our capital, and we've done approximately 150 loans in the last 3 weeks. And each loan is for 10,000 Rand. Normally we ask, if it's in the normal course, we ask for a surety, one surety for 25,000. So 100,000 Rand loan, for example, would be 4 sureties. But for the COVID crisis, we waived sureties completely. So people can go to our website, as I said, rambam.co.za. And on the right-hand side, on the top side, you'll see that we've got this COVID emergency appeal. And there's a very simplified form which people can complete. And it's processed through the trust. It is delegated to various trustees, and we do an interview on Skype or on Zoom, and within a day, the person will have the money paid into their account. There it is. You can see it on your screen now. We've also had an incredible response from very generous donors in the community. So although we set aside R1 million, it's now up to 2.2 million rand. We've done approximately 1.5 million rands worth of loans. So we still have 700,000 rand in this emergency fund, which is available for the community immediately. And if donors continue to give to our trust, we will then unlock further funds for the community.
And Hugh, just in terms of, I mean, if someone who's already struggling financially, how do you assess their ability to repay the loan, and over what term? Because my understanding of the Rambam Trust is that it has a very, very, very low rate, if any, of bad debt or default. How do you assess that?
So that's a very good question. The most important criterion in giving a loan is, does the person have the ability to repay? You know, just like Jeffrey Lee was saying, deposits have to be protected at the bank. Our donors' money has to be protected, because if you think about those statistics I gave you, if we've done 150 million rand loans on 15 million rand, it means every rand of donors' money coming into the trust goes in and out and is recycled. It's already 10 times that the money comes in and out. So we first check a person's ability to repay. So the person would have to be employed, and we would have a look, we do an analysis of their financial situation at the time. In our questionnaire, we ask them to please set out what their earnings are and what all their liabilities are, and to give us an overview of the family structure and what the expenses are. And then it could be with sureties.
Hirsch, we've had so many questions coming in for both Jeff and Hugh. Can we quickly ask a few of them, and preferably we'll get one-word answers, because there are just so many that have come in.
Fire away.
Okay, Hugh, first of all, do you require a surety for the Rambam Trust?
We require a 25,000 rand surety. So if, in other words, if it's a 50,000 rand loan, we require 2 sureties, but that's for normal sureties. For the COVID emergency fund, we do not require a surety, but it is limited to 10,000 rand.
Okay, cool. And over what period are generally the loans given?
24 months, interest-free.
Okay. Jeff, questions have come in from you. Can one get a payment holiday on car finance as well, or is it only on property?
No, we have a very comprehensive payment relief program on mortgages, on car finance, on credit cards, and on personal loans in the retail bank.
There've also been a few questions about people who have commercial property. Does the same apply to commercial property?
I think in terms of commercial property, your best bet is to contact your bank, because it'll probably be on a case-by-case basis.
A question has come in about the government's special COVID-19 loans. If you get one of the government loans that through ABSA, is a suretyship still required?
Howie, not to my knowledge, but I'd like to find out, and I'd revert on that one.
Okay. A few people have asked, is this the time that they could potentially get a loan to start a business or finance an idea that they've had? Or is this primarily aimed at people who already have businesses that are potentially struggling because of COVID?
So if I understand the question correctly, I mean, the focus of the bank at this moment is very much on liquidity and capital. So it's protecting customers that are customers today, that are potentially falling on hard times. So that's the focus at this moment. If someone is looking for a loan, i.e. wanting to start a new business, I mean, that would follow normal loan application processes.
Do you have any idea how long it's taking people to get back to clients once they've applied for a government or an ABSA loan?
I'd have to revert on that one, around those turnaround times, Howard.
Cool. Hugh, a question come in. If someone doesn't have a job, is it still a place, the Rambam Trust, for them to go to for a loan, or is this specifically aimed at people who already have businesses?
It is specifically for people that are able to repay the loan.
Cool. Jeff, a question for you. After we come out of lockdown, are you predicting an increase in interest rates, or do you think we're in a low interest rate environment for a while?
No, I think, as I might have mentioned earlier to Herschel, I think we're predicting a very stable interest rate environment. I think the government has scope to reduce interest rates further should they feel the need, because inflation is well under control. I think we're going to be in a stable environment for some time.
Okay, there are lots of people who've come in with business ideas that they want financing for, but this is clearly not the time to do it. People have said they've got in fact, previous bonds with ABSA. Is this a time that they could actually go and reactivate those bonds on their properties in order to get finance from the bank?
So if those bonds have not been cancelled, i.e. they've just been paid down, but the bond and the security is still in place, then absolutely they should either speak to their private banker or contact their bank about getting access to those funds.
Hugh, a question says, if you're a sole trader and you're not registered with Cipro, but you are trading, can you still apply to the Rambam Trust?
Absolutely. Howard, the principle is that if you're earning, you're able to get a loan. You can apply for a loan. And there are certain circumstances where we will do a loan purely based on the strength of the sureties. So we're very flexible. And the 24-month period that we're talking about is not cast in stone. Sometimes under certain circumstances, we will extend it. What we try and do on each case is look at it on the merits and do the best that we can. We're looking to loan our money. We're not looking to sit on our money, but we obviously have to protect it so that it comes back to other people.
Jeff, there have been questions relating to specific industries, whether you'd be willing to fund. So maybe you can say, I don't see why not, or that's a definite no-no. One is the taxi industry.
So financing, are you talking about financing of vehicles?
Or loans at this point in time to people running maybe taxi fleets?
So we do finance the taxi industry through our vehicle finance department.
Okay, the hospitality industry?
You know, Howard, I mean, I think to go through all of these industries might be challenging. You know, I think what I'd like to say is that where you have a business idea that you'd like to start in a particular industry, you must absolutely contact your private banker. There's no industries, to my knowledge, that are kind of off limits. Let me put it to you that way. I think it all depends on the business case, the cash flows, the opportunity that's presented, and the realism that's built into the business case.
And let us, Herschel, I know at the end of this, we'll be able to come back to all of the panelists and ask many, many more questions. But if we can ask a final question in this category, and that is, does the National Credit Act impact on the loans available?
So that's a very, very good question. So in certain instances, the National Credit Act does impact on the loans available. It's in a very small, it's in a particular where we are essentially extending limits on structured lending or credit cards for not a specific purpose, i.e. we're extending limits in order to allow customers to pay, to take payment relief. So it means the NCA has given the banks dispensation not to have to do affordability and such like. So that is a very, very good question. Yes.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Hugh, and thanks, Jeff. And if you could stay on post panel, I know we're running late. So apologies to our other panelists and to our viewers, but there's a lot of pertinent questions. I think there's still other questions for Hugh and for Jeff. Before we move on, we've got a new survey. Have you or your business, you can answer multiple times, either applied for government funding applied to one of the general funds for assistance, Solidarity, Oppenheimer, Rupert, or Motsepi, applied to the Rambam Trust or one of the communal funds, applied to your bank for a payment holiday, or none of the above. Dan, Lisa Fent is saying it doesn't let you choose more than one, so not sure. But we'll get to those. Jeff and Hugh, please stay on board if you can. Lots of questions for you, and thanks so much for your time. And we're going to move on to Helene, if you could unmute. Errol, if you could unmute. So let's have a look. So at the moment, roughly 42% of the respondents have so far applied for either a loan or some sort of funding. And I want to just emphasize that, you know, I think that we're really only starting to see now, because don't forget, April's been our first month of lockdown. I'm anticipating that many of these stats will be going up as we move into May. I also want to just comment. I think you're the first panelist who's had a partial bookcase. I saw a tweet a little while ago that said, to all the brave souls who appear on Zoom interviews without a bookshelf behind them, well done to you. It seems to be the flavor of the day, to have a bookshelf behind you. So Hugh, I think you're our first panelist who's got a partial bookshelf. So well done to all of our other panelists for avoiding that. Errol, welcome. Helene, welcome. We're running a little bit late, but as you can see,
thank you very much.
A lot of on the ground stuff, and that's the object of tonight's panel. Helene, I'm going to start with you. I think to the community, ORTJET doesn't need much of an introduction, but I'm going to ask you just to start off and tell everyone what ORTJET does, and then to give us some sort of insight into how COVID and how this business environment has impacted on what you do, and what is ORTJET doing for the businesses that you work with to help them get through these really challenging times.
Thank you, Herschel, and thank you to Howard and Dan for inviting me onto this panel. ORTJET was established about 15 years ago, and one of the founders is actually sitting on the panel today, Paul Bacher. The original purpose of ORTJET was to introduce small businesses to the acumen that's available within our community to help them grow their businesses. ORTJET is available nationally. We have offices in Cape Town and Johannesburg, but we do help businesses from anywhere. When the onset of COVID hit us, none of us were prepared. Not ORTJET, not our businesses, and it hit the world. And you know, here we all are, sort of wondering what's going to happen. Where are we going to go? Even the topic of this webinar is very fitting, because we like little vessels bobbing along in stormy waters, not knowing when, you know, the calm is coming. And when a business has no time to prepare, no strategy that will save them because what they had planned before is not relevant now. So ORTJET was approached by some of our mentors together with business people from the community to form a business rescue panel. What this panel does is they make themselves fully aware of all the funding that's available, as well as the help from the Jewish community that's also available. Many of our businesses, being small, unfortunately are not tax compliant, have not paid UIF. A lot of them are not even, you know, they don't fall into any of the parameters where funding has been made available. So it leaves them having to think about how they can change their business, how they can fit in, and they sit with the panels, and the panels brainstorm with them, because it's very difficult when you are stressed and you can't see the wood from the trees, and you can't think further than today, because you can't take care of your family, let alone look after your business needs. You can't pay your staff and you can't pay your rent. So you sit there and you think, and now? So we have currently helped 60 businesses so far. Our panels sit with the businesses daily. It's a holistic, safe environment that is completely anonymous. You know, nobody needs to feel that everybody will know that they're with us. And we help them brainstorm, we help them pivot, we help them think about if they're doing this currently, what have they learned, what can they offer, and how can they change so that for now and post-COVID, they're able to work in the new world.
Can you talk to me about, so, and similar to what Alon, I think, spoke earlier, there's the chaos phase, and then you start to think about how you can re-engineer. So talk to me once again, what are the tough conversations that your mentors are having to have with these businesses where simply there's either no revenue or the revenue doesn't meet the expenditure? Where do you start?
Well, Herschel, we always very honest, because, you have to, if there is no hope of getting any government funding, you have to know that up front. You have to accept it and deal with it. And then you have to move forward. And you have to, as you said, go through those stages of chaos into a stage of acceptance and thinking, now what can I do? So for an example, if you have a business in the hospitality industry, very, very difficult. How do you fit in? How do you make money? What's going to happen? How long are we going to be down? Nobody knows that. Nobody can answer that. But from the hospitality industry, what can you do? Can you start phoning clients that spend time with you? Can you use this time to market? Can you use this time to make sure that once we start to come out of this, that clients will remember you? Much like the plumber, I can't remember who was talking about the plumber who now had a website and he was giving advice on plumbing. I guarantee you,
Alon was using that.
Was it Alon? I guarantee you that everybody who has looked at his website will call him if they've got a plumbing issue. His name will be, foremost in their minds. So you've got to be creative. You've got to be a creative thinker, and you've got to think about ways of changing. I mean, the hotel industry, many of them have indoor laundries. Why can't they approach and combine efforts with the hospitals and perhaps do the laundry for them? Things need to be sterilized and cleaned. So it's going to be collaboration, it's going to be creative thinking, and it's going to be resilience. And also, there's the human factor where I get these emails daily and they are heartbreaking. They truly are. What do you say to somebody who says, never mind, my business is now inoperable, but I can't put food on the table. So we as Ortjet do not offer funding at this stage. So we would refer them to the Rambam or to other Jewish organizations that could assist them.
And Helene, let me ask you, so you've mentioned, I think you're working with about 60 organizations. What would be—
Sorry, Herschel, you're breaking up?
I said, I think you mentioned you're working with about 60 companies at the moment. What are the criteria for you to take on new companies that you would need to mentor? What's your capacity to take on new businesses, to mentor, help them get through these tough times and help them, as you mentioned, to repivot?
Herschel, funnily enough, I'd say 90% of the businesses that have approached us are not Ortjet businesses. They're businesses within the community that have not joined us in before, and we're helping them. We have the capacity to help whoever needs us. We have a database of hundreds of mentors. So whoever needs us, we'll be there. We will not turn anybody away, whether they're an Ortjet business or not.
Fantastic. I mean, one of the many amazing organizations. I know there was a question popped up, how do we get in contact? And I think Dan mentioned we'll post up those details imminently. I know there've been a couple of other questions, which I'm sure Howie's going to bring up. Errol, I want to move to you, one of the founders and I think head of marketing for Lullaway. Great to have you on board. One of the things that struck me in our conversation earlier, and what some of the panelists have mentioned, Helene, Alon, is just be careful about suddenly getting people that you might need going into the future to help grow your business in whatever direction it goes. And coming out of COVID, many businesses are going to be constrained by resources whether it be human resources and financial resources. And I think one of the opportunities that there are is looking at what your business does, and you want to just take us through those opportunities and how you see that impacting on businesses to get through and post-COVID.
Great, thank you. Hi, Herschel. Hi, Howie. Thanks very much for having me on your show. Just to let you know, I'm one of the Orchard businesses. We actually won a Orchard prize for a business plan idea that we came up with 9 years ago, and thank God we've been quite successful. We employ about 150 people now, and it's 9 years down the line. So yeah, I mean, I understand just where some of those businesses are that are going to Orchard. Just to give you a bit of a background.
Can I just maybe say that, I mean, 9-10 years ago, I mean, that was just coming out of the financial market crash as well. So, you know, what everyone is saying, there's always, if you can find the opportunity, there's always a good opportunity for business.
Absolutely. Absolutely, without a doubt. I mean, times are challenging right now. We're not going to pretend that we're not going to like candy coat them. I mean, most businesses are going to be under a lot of pressure, depending on, never mind what size they are. Times are tight. Business is going to be slow. Resources are going to be tight, etc., etc. Just a bit of an insight as to who we are and what we do. Basically, we are a social enterprise. So we first is social. Our intention is to do good and make an impact in the world. But we are still a business with the intention of obviously making profits and growing accordingly. Where we came from is my partner at the time had a number of internet cafes around the country, and thousands and thousands of young people were coming into those internet cafes looking for work and not finding any solution. So we saw a gap. We saw that there needed to be some sort of universal platform for the guys to come and apply, and then obviously to channel them to the right positions. The business changed, technology wasn't quite up to it at the time, et cetera, et cetera. So what we found is, there's a lot of money out there in the space of corporate, foundation, government money, focusing specifically on supplementing incomes when it comes to placing people into positions. I must clarify what I mean when I say people. The majority of the people that we're talking about are young entrants into the market, predominantly previously disadvantaged people that haven't had job opportunities or any job experience in the past. Now, most small businesses going forward are going to have a major problems around human capital, but maintaining human capital. And I'm going to quote Alon here. I know Alon quite well, but there's this washing machine that a lot of businesses are going to be very much focused on, procuring the business, delivering on the business, billing on the business, and just going around in the washing machine. I know from ourselves, we started off with 2 of us. We did everything, from literally, you start a business, you're doing everything. You're marketing, you're selling, you're producing, you're billing, you're dealing with all the other, the admin tasks of the business, et cetera, et cetera. So where we've built quite a strong platform is around, procuring funding from various funders, in the form of stipends. So basically, we would take, we get 1,000 stipends, 10,000 stipends, whatever it might be. There's going to be a lot of that going forward the president spoke about, 100 billion rand being pushed into the economy, specifically about job preservation, job creation, small business development, small business preservation, et cetera, et cetera. And a substantial amount of that money is going to be in the stipend space. And we've been quite successful in placing people into small businesses and getting funding from a third party. So basically, getting the business out of that washing machine. There's this ability to basically go and put someone into a position and taking a lot of pressure off yourself in order to grow and build and maintain your business. Okay, so you bring a young person into the business. Sorry, Herschel.
How do you, so what you're saying is potentially people are going to be constrained by resources, and what you potentially do, tap into funding that allows interns to go into people's businesses. Do they still need to pay them, or do they purely rely on the stipend for income?
It's usually at the discretion of the business. I mean, the stipend is usually between 2.5 to 4.5K. There's going to be substantial amount of money going forward. We're going to be very busy going forward, you know, just by virtue of the fact of where we are in the marketplace. And it's usually at the discretion of the business whether they want to top them up or not. It's not always the case. Sometimes it's you know, they are expected to top up a small percentage, but generally, basically, it's staff that they can take on, that they can train, that they can teach about the business, and you know, have that staff's salary supplemented.
And Errol, does this apply only whether you're a business where you would need to place 20 or 30 people, or if you're needing 2 or 3 people, is that option still available to you? Absolutely, that's a space where we need to focus on. At the end of the day, real jobs and real job creation is going to be really in the small business space. It's what this country needs. This country needs solid SMME, you know, businesses out there that are generating income and that are employing people. What we've realized, because we work with corporate as well, and in the corporate space, generally, a lot of the guys are taking them on for BE purposes or whatever they may be, but they're not necessarily keeping them on full time. And percentage-wise, if it's a small business that takes on 2, 3, 4, 5 people, generally they've invested in that person, even though they've had that holiday of not having to pay that person's salary for 12 months. After that 12 months, there's been enough human investment there for them to, you know, high percentage of these guys are being taken on permanently, and then they're taking on new interns and more interns and building accordingly. And the success, Errol, sorry, Howard, just what percentage of interns placed in organizations end up staying there or are successful in their jobs? Do you monitor that? Is it a high percentage? Yeah, we do monitor that. And I mean, there's multiple factors involved. You know, there's industries. So we got a multiple array of industries. Some industries, the retention is substantially better. Then, yeah, there's lots of factors. I mean, different businesses have different approaches towards their entry-level staff. You know, some see them as a commodity that's easily replaceable, and some see them as a commodity that's very critical. And if they invest properly in that commodity, they can grow their business and obviously survive and thrive going forward. So there are multiple factors, but the percentage, I don't have the exact numbers, but the percentage is substantially higher when it comes to small business retention compared to a corporate space, the retention in the corporate space. And that's what we need. I mean, that's really what we need.
No, we'd like to tell everyone that if you have questions, just a reminder, please put them into the Q&A section. And yes, we will provide contact details for all the organizations and companies that are appearing tonight. We'll mail that off to everyone who's registered for today's panel, so you can stop asking for everyone's contacts individually. But there are a lot of questions that have come in, particularly for Helene. So Helene, if you don't mind, short and sharp answers, but we've had about 3 or 4 questions. Does AutoJet charge for its services? Let's just unmute you before you you answer that. I think you may have to unmute yourself.
AutoJet has a commitment fee. We're essentially an NGO. Well, we are an NGO, and we charge a commitment fee of 1,800 Rand for the year. Although, should you not have the funds to pay us, we never turn anybody away. Everyone is welcome, whether you can pay or not.
Okay, but that's the total cost, if you can afford it, 1,800 Rand to be part of the AutoJet universe.
Absolutely, and that gives you the opportunity to join our training. We run boot camps. We do many activities throughout the year to grow you on all levels, emotionally, personally, and through your business.
So Helene, you also mentioned that you're assisting people accessing many of the government funds and the other funds that are out there. And this one question seems to come up time and time again. Do you have to be a BEE company in order to access government funding, or any of the Solidarity funds or the Motsepe funds or the Oppenheimer funds?
Not necessarily. Some of the funds are only for companies that are 51% Black owned, but a lot of the other funds, you need to be UIF and tax compliant, and those are the only parameters. So it's not only triple B.
The tourism fund, which is the only one government fund that I'm aware of that has a BEE requirement, in fact, is in court tomorrow. I believe Solidarity has taken the Minister of Tourism to court because of the BEE component of the tourism fund. But I'm not aware, I don't know if you are, of any of the other funds that have a BEE component attached.
None of the other funds I'm aware of have a BEE component.
And in terms of the funds, which funds have you helped people apply to that have been successful?
We don't always get to hear if they've been successful or not. We do listen to each business's story and if they are compliant or not, and then we direct them to the correct one. Should they need help filling in the documentation, they would specifically need to ask us for that. We don't offer that as standard. What I do have to say is something that we have learned through this is many small businesses are not compliant. They are not UIF compliant and they're not registered businesses and they haven't paid, or they're not registered taxpayers. And this has come back to bite them because they have no access to any funding or any government funding.
Errol, a question that's coming for you. It says, Errol, who qualifies for ETR tax benefits, the sponsor or the host? And surely it's way better to rather employ your own learner and you get learnership and ETR tax benefits, which allows a company to employ people for free, better than a yes intern.
Sorry, say that again, Howie, I didn't get that.
So the person is saying, who gets the ETI tax benefit? And surely it's better to employ someone directly and you get the benefit than a yes intern.
Okay, so we're not necessarily speaking about yes only. My expectation is that yes is going to be, corporate funding is going to be harder to access. When it comes to ETR, if you're not paying the salary, you can't claim ETR. So if the salary is being funded by a government institution, a SETA, a municipality, a government department, and something like that, you wouldn't be able to claim your ETI. But at the end of it, if you want to pay the salary and claim back R1,000 ETI, doesn't really make mathematical sense as opposed to having someone that's supplemented completely. So if you're hosting and you're not paying a salary, you can't claim ETI.
Then Errol, another question for you. Errol, do you currently have more sponsors or hosts of interns? I'm not quite sure.
I have more sponsors. I predict, and the work that we're doing at the moment, and the stuff that that's in the pipeline, we're going to have a substantial amount of sponsorship, substantial amounts of funding available. Getting hosts is not a problem. It's not hard, but things have changed. I mean, I'm talking, outside of, what the predictions are with regards to COVID going forward. A lot of people are going to be letting people go as opposed to taking people on. So I would imagine there's going to be a substantial amount of funding out there and that we'll have access to a substantial amount of that. As it currently stands, it's pretty even.
And Helena, final question for this segment, and you'll be around afterwards. Everyone will be around afterwards to answer more questions. But someone is saying, if I can't afford the ORT membership, are we still able to get help? But I think you've answered that question already. Maybe you just want to reiterate that.
Anybody can join ORT-JET. If you're able to pay the 1,800 Rand a year, which is 150 Rand a month, that's awesome. If not, give us a call and, we're happy to take you on. I'd also like to do a request that if there is an entrepreneurial donor out there that would like to support us, please be in contact with me. We really do need your help. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you. Herschel,
thank you so much. Helene, thank you so much. We'll be posting up all of the details and hope. I know we're running a bit late, but as you can see, a lot of on-the-ground questions. So hopefully you'll stay around and there'll be some more questions to answer at the end of the panel. We're going to move across to Larry, Dave, also without a bookshelf. I'm glad to see. Larry, we're going to talk about labor, and I know that you mentioned up front while we were discussing pre-8 o'clock that you represent probably more on the employer side. But if you had seen Howie on one of the other panels, he has a collection of about 55 hats from all over the world. So you're going to be required to wear 2 hats tonight. We're going to start by saying, and you've heard Aline and Alon talk about this chaos phase. You're running a business, however big or small, businesses dried up, and you've got a real challenge in what do you do about salaries? What do you do about your staff? And do the same labor laws apply under this lockdown and state of disaster as they would in a normal operating environment?
Yeah, thanks, Herschel, and thanks to you and Howie and the Jewish Report for including me on your panel. I think the starting point is that the impact undoubtedly is significant for both business and for labor. Employers, unfortunately, have to now take drastic measures in order to sustain their businesses, to ensure that there's a business to get back to. And the consequence of this virus is the ability of companies to have to adjust themselves in order to make those changes. And the casualties, unfortunately, are the employees, which then filters through to their families and to their well-being. So the situation is quite simple. There is a kind of a silent adjustment to the application of our labor law, certainly from a process point of view, because typically an employee's terms of employment can never be changed without some form of consultation process. But with this particular circumstance that we face, simply put, an employee is unable to tender their services. We know that that's not due to any fault on their part. But in the absence of that tender, an employer, strictly speaking, is absolved from their obligation to pay salaries and wages. And that's the unfortunate impact of the epidemic. Employees are now placed in a precarious situation where that consultation element or that expectation appears to have fallen by the wayside, and employers are now applying what they refer to a no work, no pay situation, which is obviously detrimental and highly prejudicial to those employees and their families. But again, the discord that exists is the balance that must be struck between an employer sustaining their business, keeping head above water, and again, the compassion to some degree that would be required for the impact that follows onto the employee.
Mary, so let me ask you, does this sort of, I'm not going to call it relaxation, but shifting of this consultation process, is it during the lockdown period, or is it during the state of disaster period for however long that lasts? Which has triggered that relaxation or that broadening of what you can do in terms of the labor law?
Yeah, so for as long as these regulations restrict an employee's ability to tender their services, where their performance of their obligation to perform their job has been now prevented, that provides the employer with the legal ability to not pay wages. And there is some controversy around this particular legal principle, which is the impossibility of performance, and it comes along in the commercial field as well, the commercial law field, which the other panelists will speak on, I'm sure, but it applies equally to the employment scenario and the employment relationship. But the controversy that I'm referring to is where labor is saying it doesn't take away the constitutional right, the fundamental right to be consulted. Every worker has the right to fair labor practices. And the argument there is that you still need to consult with me in order to provide me with an opportunity as an employee to put forward some alternatives to mitigate against the impact of not receiving a salary suddenly. It's a sudden, drastic measure that's been implemented by many employers.
So let's look at an example. And I know when you talk about labor, I think many people are certainly you think about working with mines and large corporations and unions. We may have some of those, some of those in the audience, but I think a lot of our audiences have got staff members, employees. It might be a few, it might be 40, it might be 100. So let's have a look. Your business has been locked down. You're unable to do whatever, offer your services, sell your products. You've got to make some cuts. One of the areas where many businesses are going to have to look is around their staff. What are the options? So you mentioned no work, no pay. Are there measures? So could it be half work, half pay? If you're only offering people 50% of the salary, does it entitle those people only to work for 50% of the hours in the state without being able to consult with people directly? Are you allowed to retrench or make people redundant? Take us through those kind of practical part of what an employer could do and should do to not fall foul of labor law.
Yeah, so there's a number of options, and it all depends on what the position of the business is, and businesses need to plan ahead. There's a proclivity towards panic, which then filters through to the employees, and it results in a lot of early decisions, in particular placing employees on no work, no pay without any discussion. That can also, the other option is short time. Paying employees who are able to work from home remotely must be paid. It's only the employees who are unable to perform their obligations from home and are not performing their obligations from home to be placed on a scenario of no work, no pay. That is a layoff period until such time as the employer is able to deploy them and receive their.
So Larry, I just want to cut you for a moment. Just the quick survey that popped up. So interesting. You know, we're a month in, and where many businesses for the month of March probably had a reasonably regular month, but we're already seeing that 58% of the panelists surveyed have already been through or are in the process of being through some sort of labor process about unpaid leave, retrenchments, say reductions, and we're really just in the early phases of this state of disaster and of this lockdown.
Yeah, and the way it's been dealt with is obviously there's an encouragement by the Department of Labor for employers to invoke the mechanisms of the TERS, which is the Temporary Employee-Employer Relief Fund, in order to compensate employees who are not going to be paid during the period of lockdown. The other options are to consider applying annual leave against a period of unpaid leave, which is the unpaid period, to apply that leave, but that's on condition that the employee makes the request. It cannot be imposed upon employees to force employees to take the annual leave during a period of lockdown. Restructuring and retrenchments are becoming quite rough at the moment in terms of cutting costs, in particular redundancies where employees are unable to offer their services. A typical example is a receptionist position. Receptionists are becoming a common feature of redundancy as a result of the inability to carry out their function from home. Lines are being diverted, emails are being diverted. So administrative functions such as front desk functions are becoming redundant as a direct result of the lockdown.
So just once again, just practical questions. Do you have to be able to clearly show the staff member that if you're putting them on reduced pay, that in fact their work has been reduced? Or are you able to differentiate? So if you've got 10 employees in your organization, can you keep some on a full-time basis, reduce some to half, those that are potentially sitting at home doing nothing through no fault of their own? And let's be very clear, as you mentioned, I mean, there's a real human element to this, not only from the president, but just from a community point of view. But are you able to differentiate by the role and the amount of work that they've actually got to do?
Yeah, so employers in these circumstances are entitled to assess their operational demands as a result of the impact of the lockdown. And by doing that, they can make those distinctions. They can have a look at what their needs are from a functionality point of view, what employee functions are required, and they can adjust those functions in any way that they see fit, as long as it is in line with the operational needs of the business at the time. And that will then result in employees being placed on short time, employees being placed on no work, no pay scenario, indefinite layoff. That can result in retrenchments also during the course of lockdown. So an employer has a broad base to work from and make these changes, as long as it's done in a particular fashion. And I do encourage employers to consult before making any decisions, because it's not a difficult thing to consult, but it's certainly important for employees to plan.
Do businesses, I know how it's popped up, which means there's some good questions coming up. Do businesses have to prove, so before they start going into these processes, do they have to be able to prove business survival is at stake? Is that a prerequisite before you start going into reduced time or redundancies or putting in people onto unpaid leave? Is that a requirement of going through these processes?
Not when it comes to redundancy. So a business can restructure for the purposes of making more money, even if they're in a profitable situation. So it's not an absolute requirement, but certainly to use it as an opportunity or an excuse, being a profitable business, to terminate employment would be frowned upon ultimately. And I think we're going to have a flurry of litigation at some point in time. It's going to happen when our courts and CCMA open again. For these kind of matters, a lot of those questions, such as the one that you just posed, is going to be tested, I believe.
So just last question there on that. So despite the fact that a staff member in these circumstances may be forced to agree to take half work, half pay, it wouldn't preclude them, and we're going to go on to employee rights in a moment, it wouldn't preclude them at some point in time from still approaching the CCMA, or once they've accepted these new terms during this lockdown, does that become then the new employment contract between the employee and employer?
I think the employees may be able to progress a case that they were forced into the situation, but to a large degree, employers are going to be protected from this common law principle that we have of impossibility of performance. The generally accepted view as we stand now is that employers are permitted not to pay salaries or wages if the reason for that is a direct result of the impact of the lockdown. So I think in that litigation, those questions will be tested, but employers are not going to be as vulnerable as they would be without a lockdown scenario in place.
Thanks. Howie, I see there's some questions mounting up there. You need to unmute there, Howie.
Sorry, we've probably received about 30 questions for Larry. Some of them were actually investment advice because people couldn't tell the difference between Larry and his brother Stephen. But we'll leave those two apart. Larry,
is that by looks or is that by advice, Howie?
Larry, I'm going to ask you to do the impossible and try to give one-word answers or one-sentence answers because there are just so many questions. But question number one. Person was recently retrenched or their business closed down during COVID period, and they discovered that the employer was not paying their UIF. What do they do?
They must inform, well, the employee can inform the UIF or demand that the employer informs the UIF, and the department must then take measures against that employer because the employer has in effect broken the law by not being registered.
But does the employee have any rights?
Yes,
or ability to claim?
It'll take a lot of effort and a lot of perseverance and patience by the employee to make enough noise with the Department of Labour, who is now currently overwhelmed by all the applications that are coming through. But if they persevere and they will still be entitled to be paid, but they'll have to go through a whole lot of red tape to get there.
Next question. Are you allowed to retrench staff during this 6-week lockdown period?
Yes, there's nothing preventing an employer to meet its own operational needs, which includes a restructuring resulting in retrenchments. Yes.
If you retrench people during this period, do you have to pay them the standard retrenchment one week for every year completed
Yes.
service?
Statutory payments is 1 week per year, which is the severance pay, leave pay, and notice pay. Those are all still required to be paid unless the employer can prove financially that it cannot afford that. But then they're looking at a potential action of liquidation.
Next question. Can I put my employees on paid leave, forced paid leave, if they have leave due to them during this period?
Not forced, no. It has to be at the employee's request and agreement must be reached.
Okay. Can I put my employees on forced unpaid leave during this period? See,
Yes.
they're not working.
Yes.
And that's essentially, sorry, I mean, you see a lot of stuff, especially in the States, where companies are putting a lot of people onto what they call furlough. I would assume that's the same thing. It's just no work, no pay, or unpaid leave, same sort of thing.
Exactly the same principle, except in some of those countries, such as the UK, the government is paying for the time for a certain period. But it's the same concept, yes.
Yeah.
Larry, a question relating to UIF. What is the threshold or the maximum you can claim from UIF? Is there a threshold?
Yeah, so it's not something that I'm dealing with, but my understanding is it's the maximum of 16 or 17,000, somewhere there.
How I think Jaco will deal with that.
Yeah, he'll deal with it. Sorry, I'm mistaken. That's not the maximum. I think Jaco must deal with that question.
Yeah.
Okay. A person has said they have a part-time domestic worker who comes in once a week. She obviously hasn't been coming in for the last 6 weeks. They don't want to retrench her, but do they have to pay her during this period that she's not coming in?
If it's the direct result of the lockdown, and it's then they do not have to pay the domestic worker.
Larry, the most difficult question, someone is looking for an affordable labor consultant, but I don't expect you to answer that question. I'm just going to say, of course, you're very affordable. A few questions have come in relating to UIF payments under TERS for non-South African citizens. Should I rather ask Jaco that question?
Yeah, I think so, Howie.
Okay, fantastic. Larry, there's so many more questions. While I was asking that, another 10 questions have come in for you during this exact same period, but you'll be hanging around at the end of the show as well to answer some questions for us.
Sure.
Thanks, Larry, so much. We look forward to catching up with you at the end. Howie, thank you as always. We're gonna move on, and I would really ask our panelists, please, to, while you're not on, head to the kitchen. Fire up your Nespresso machine, have a cup of coffee, because we really love you all to come back. A lot of questions. This is really on the ground stuff that people can implement. And our next panel, we have 3 specialists from BDO Audit and Advisory. I think first up is Jaco Nel and David Bass, who Dan is bringing up now, and we've also got Professor David Warnicker. I'm not sure that, I think this could be the first professor that we've had on any one of our panels. So thank you. If I could just, David, if you unmute yourself, bottom left of your screen, and David, if you have got video, that would be great, but not serious, as long as you can hear us and we can hear you. Jaco and David, once again from BDO Audit Advisory and Tax, thank you for being on our panel. There are a whole host of funds that you can apply to and incentives, and that Howie alluded to, but I think the one that has probably caused the most confusion, and Dan, I'm going to ask you just to screen share. There was one slide, if you can. I think that the fund that has caused the most confusion as to the what, how, is the TERS fund, and the difference between TERS and UIF. And so I'm going to kick off there, and with the limited time that we've got, if you can really just give us a broad overview of as you've put on your slide, what are the options with UIF, what is TERS, how do you apply, what is the process, and are people actually getting paid? Because we know the spreadsheets have changed, the sites have crashed, So take us through your slide.
Thanks very much, Herschel. In terms of your questions around TERS, the simplest explanation is TERS is a form of UIF. It's called the Temporary Employee-Employer Relief Scheme, and it enables employers to pay employees with funds made available by UIF. Now, the salary that's determined is using the normal UIF tables, but it ranges from a minimum of 3,500 to a maximum of 17,712 Rand. So that's the maximum amount.
That's per person.
Per person. Now, this is determined by the UIF. So if people want to know how much they're entitled to, the only way they'll actually find out is through their application. Now, previously, when TERS was initially launched, it was a very different process using an email application process. It's now online, done through the UIF portal. Now, it was for companies in financial distress. They officially amended the definition to say it is companies who have partially or completely closed as a result of COVID-19. So that means if your company has partially or completely closed as a result of COVID-19, you can apply for this. Employers can also apply for this allowance and then top up the salaries of the employees. So they can apply for the maximum amount of TERS, and then when they get the money in from the UIF, they can top this up so that this helps out employees with their monthly salaries.
David, let me just stop you there for a second. So you made the statement people can apply for TERS and then top up with salary. And interesting, I think a lot of people potentially are looking at it as the other way around, that you pay a person a reduced salary amount and then you top it up with TERS. Is there a difference in what I'm saying?
So typically the applicants who have tried applying for a top-up generally get it kicked out, as we've seen with the applications. And although the legislation makes allowance for that, it doesn't seem to be working in practice at the moment. So those applicants who apply for a 0% paying across are the ones that are more successful in their applications at the moment. So because this is a very new what we call allowance, and it's not like normal UIF, which has been around for years and the processes are streamlined. This, in the last 3 weeks, the process has changed twice quite dramatically. So we have to just bear with us and understand that the process will change. And although the legislation makes reference to certain processes, we need to work with what's working at the moment.
And just talk to me about the difference. TERS is being administered by UIF. My understanding is that you can still, if you are retrenched, if you lose your job, you can still claim for UIF, which is independently of the company applying for TERS for people whose salaries have been reduced or minimized. Is that correct, or is it all now being merged into one?
So technically, TERS is just a form of UIF. So for example, if you get retrenched, you can apply for UIF in your personal capacity. If you get sick, you can apply for the illness benefit through UIF, or you can also apply for the reduced work time benefit as well. And each of them is a different type of UIF, but majority of companies will be applying for TERS. However, if you you employ less than 10 employees, then those individuals can apply on their own. But if you employ more than 10 employees, then you need to apply on their behalf.
And that's specifically for TERS?
Yes.
That's correct.
It is obviously for those companies who are UIF compliant. So you need to have made those UIF contributions. If you haven't, then you don't qualify for this benefit.
Are there any other qualifying criteria, David? I know some of our other panelists have mentioned that you've got to be, let's assume, PAY compliant or just generally SARS compliant. And when you say shut down or partially shut down, what are the criteria? I mean, I think there might be many businesses who are thinly trading but haven't really shut down. How do you qualify partially or fully shut down, number one? And is it only that you've contributed to UIF, or do you have to be broadly tax compliant in order to apply for the TERS benefit?
So I think David Warnaker will speak about the other tax benefits, but for TERS specifically, they've only stated that you need to be UIF compliant. In terms of the qualifying criteria, the original criteria was that you're in financial distress and completely closed. They then opened it up to say that they've removed the criteria of financially distressed and partially or completely closed. I've been offered more detail than this at this stage. So our advice to most clients is if you have been impacted in some way and can show some form of distress, and we use that very broadly, then we would go ahead and apply, because in the application process, you will find out very quickly if you qualify.
David, is this TERS fund, is it a limited fund, or so do employers have to worry that TERS is going to run out of money at some point in time, or has the government allocated sufficient funding? Because the longer this goes on, I would imagine the more claims that there are going to be.
So as we understand, they've sectioned off a portion of the UIF for this purpose. However, if it does go ahead, it is our understanding that they would need to make a larger sum available to pay for the claims over a longer period.
And do you have to claim month by month, or when you claim, you can claim for a 2 or a 3? Is there a maximum number of months that you can claim, or do you have to do it month by month?
So our clients have been applying month by month at this stage. However, you can apply in advance, and with the understanding that any overpayment that you can reimburse to the UIF.
Okay, so and the process, as you said, it's an online process. I know there's a whole spreadsheet that you have to fill in. Is anything that you feel that our participants should be aware of, key things that need to be in completing that application process?
Some important documents that you will need is you'll need the ID documents of your employees. You'll need your proof of banking. You need your UIF details. So it's important that whoever processes your payroll for you does your application, because they would have access to a lot of this information. You would also need to know the employee's remuneration, their start dates. So it is very important that whoever does your payroll does your application for you, with the understanding they have access to these documents.
Fantastic, super. David, I'm gonna move across to David, Professor David Warnaker on the tax side. David, we're talking to I guess small, medium-sized businesses. I know once again that there are various tax incentives. Dan, I'm going to ask you to just put up that slide. I think it was slide 3 that we spoke about earlier. David, if I could ask you to just take us through the various tax incentives that are available, and some of the things to consider when applying for those tax incentives, and what are the criteria, and who qualifies for them.
And good evening, Herschel, and it's good to be with you and all the other viewers. Yeah, so the state of play at the moment is we had a draft bill that came out on the 1st of April, and then the other day there were various amendments that were proposed to it, and so we're going to have a refreshed bill, if you like, that we expect to come out on Thursday. So this stuff isn't completely cast in stone at this stage. That bill will come out for public comment and so forth. So it's a bit of a strange situation that we're in, because some of these reliefs that we've got here are actually supposed to be in play at the moment, although the legislation isn't really that close to being passed at the moment to give effect to it, in a sense. And obviously the bills will still have to go through Parliament at a later point. But yeah, there are a number of tax relief measures, and they aimed at small and medium enterprises largely, but not exclusively. And so let's just go through the main ones. I'm not going to go through all of the ones on this list. And by the way, I've produced quite a detailed presentation, which I'm happy to share with the participants on the call tonight, which can be sent around. So there's a lot more detail in that presentation than just this slide, but let's just go through one or two of them. So the employment tax incentive relief, which applies for 4 months in respective amounts paid to employees during that time, it's an additional up to 750 Rand for each of those 4 months per qualifying employee that an employer would be able to claim under the ETI scheme. And just briefly for that, the ETI scheme applies to people earning less than 6,500 Rand per month remuneration. In its current form, it applies to people who are under the age of 30. This is now, for this 4-month period, been extended to any employee who earns less than 6,500. And you can claim, as I say, it's not automatic 750 extra, because it depends on their remuneration. It's a sliding scale. The closer you get to 6,500, the less it gets to zero at 6,500. But basically, it's quite a nice benefit for people that employ employees in that earnings category. And for that one, one's got to have been registered with SARS as an employer on the 1st of March of this year. That's one of the prerequisites that applies for that benefit. Then we've got a skills development levy holiday, and there's been a bit of conjecture as to what's exactly is meant by holiday. Is it a deferral or a complete non-payment? Seems that it's a complete non-payment. In other words, no employers will have to pay skills development levy for 4 months from the 1st of May to the 31st of August. What's a bit ambiguous, and hopefully it'll be clarified in this next round of legislation, is whether that 4-month period applies to payments to SARS during those 4 months. In other words, it could include, in fact, April's payroll amount, which is now being paid in May, or whether it's the payroll accruals that one determines that 4-month period over. So there's a bit of uncertainty as to that at this stage. Then the pay-as-you-earn relief is basically the pay-as-you-earn relief and the provisional tax relief can kind of, in a sense, be grouped together in that they apply to the kind of definition of small and medium-sized businesses only. The small and medium-sized businesses are in this bill now. The proposal is that they're being increased to gross income for income tax purposes of under 100 million or less in a particular year of assessment, which is this year of assessment that ends now from the 1st of April of this year up to the 31st of March of next year. So gross income of 100 million or less. There's another little requirement in there that not more than 10% of that gross income can come from passive income like dividends, interest, rental income, and also remuneration income is also excluded. So you can't earn more than 10% of your income from those sources in order to qualify. But then basically what happens is that 35% of your pay as you earn in the months April, May, June, and July, those payrolls can be deferred, and then you've still got to pay it to SARS, unfortunately. You pay it in 6 equal monthly installments, commencing with your payment in September month. So it would be September through to February. You'd have to pay those, no interest, no penalties. But one's just got to remember it's not a permanent, it's not a gift.
Yeah.
One's got to pay it back. And one's got to be tax compliant for that benefit as well as for the provisional tax benefit, which I'll come to in a moment. So you've got to be tax compliant with SARS at the point at which you seek to rely on the benefit. And what I definitely advise people to do is that, if you can get a copy of a tax clearance certificate at the time you're relying every month on that benefit, print it out, in case SARS challenges you and they say, well, we don't think you were tax compliant for this reason or that reason, please pay us the amount with a penalty. You didn't actually qualify, just to show that you were compliant during, when you sought to rely on the relief. And then provisional tax relief is effectively another 35% deferral. So what happens is if you're due to make a first provisional payment during the period 1 April up to the 30th of September, any first provisional payment during that period, and once again you're a small and medium business as per that 100 million definition with the less than 10% passive income thrown in, if you qualify there, then instead of paying what you normally pay 50% of your basic amount with the first provisional, you can go down to only 15%, 1.5. That's basically a 35% difference there. And then if you're due to make a second provisional payment during the period 1st of April to the 31st of March next year, there you only need to pay 65% instead of 100% of the tax that you actually owe. You have to have made good cumulatively 65% as opposed to the 100%. So once again, a 35% differential. And then those amounts that are deferred need to be paid by the time you make your third topping up payment in order to avoid interest. Once again, no penalties for understatement and no interest unless you miss that third topping up amount when it's paid.
So David, let me just interject for a moment. So what is your practical advice in the short term? We've heard from other panelists, cash is king. You got to release from your balance sheet. You got to preserve your cash, so you take advantage. But who knows how long it's going to take your business to get back to a point where it's generating sufficient cash flow to either catch up on the deferred provisional tax or the deferred income tax. How do you make that decision, and what could happen if you get to a point where you're unable to top up or to catch up those payments in the required period?
Well, look, I think what would happen, Herschel, is that if you weren't able to make those payments within that period, the standard penalties that are provided for in the Income Tax Act combined with the Tax Administration Act would kick in. And then it would be up to the taxpayer to show exactly why they couldn't actually make those payments that were due at that point if they didn't want penalties then to apply. So if, for example, you couldn't pay one of your monthly installments of making it up, you'd have to then show why you weren't able to make that payment then in order for the penalties not to apply. So there must be reasonable grounds. Now, unfortunately, if you look at case law, it's quite harsh on the subject of that because, these amounts that we're talking about when it comes to, well, especially, for example, pay as you earn, it's a withholdings tax. So actually that money never really belonged to the employer in the first place. It's actually subtracted from the salary of the employee to pay on their behalf, as it were, as a prepayment of the employee's own tax liability to SARS. And the courts have been quite scathing. There was a judgment quite recently that said that, there were no grounds not to have paid this because actually this was never the company's money in the first place. That's almost the way the courts historically looked at it, is that they said that this was almost like the first payment that the business should have made and not
the last. Yeah.
The last payment. Now, I'm not sure, it's difficult to know. But I think one does have to be very careful, and I think one should weigh up very carefully, certainly from a cash flow point of view, it makes perfect sense. If someone's giving you interest-free money, to not take advantage of that. But then one must budget. And I don't recommend to anybody sort of taking any chances with regard to paying those 6 monthly installments, for example, or any other of the payments that are due. You know, with regard to the provisional tax relief, that those payments, if you don't pay the third topping up payment, yeah, I guess under those circumstances, there could actually be a penalty because those payments are then deemed to be due on that particular date. So I think one's got to be careful there as well.
David, just running through the list there, I'm not sure how many of our clients qualify for carbon tax relief, but what would be some of the other important tax relief measures that small and medium?
Okay. I think what is important to state is that it has been indicated in the press release that if taxpayers are at more than the 100 million threshold,
yeah,
it was also stated that they could apply on a case-by-case basis, essentially to SARS for deferral of their tax payments as well. It was quite harsh wording. What it actually said in the press release is if they can show that they are incapable of paying the tax due to COVID-19. Now, how high that bar is going to be set, I don't know. But anyway, so it is possible for bigger businesses to apply directly to SARS, was the press release on that. And then it also said that the smaller businesses that do qualify under the 100 million threshold could additionally apply for any other deferrals of payments that they were forced into. So maybe speaking to your earlier point about, you know, maybe not being able to even pay the 6 monthly deferral, maybe that's a case where one could at that point say, look, you know, we just can't even pay this amount. I think we'll have to, you know, those questions, hopefully there'll be more clarity when we actually see the wording of that in a bill form and see exactly what's included and what's not, to have more insight into that. Just the other thing that I think is worth pointing out for small and medium businesses in particular is that businesses that are currently on category A and category B vendor status, in other words, they've got taxable supplies under 30 million rand per annum, and they pay on a 2-monthly VAT cycle. If they are due a refund, they can voluntarily go onto a 1-monthly VAT cycle to hopefully speed up their VAT refund. Okay. So that's a new measure that's also been announced. So that's a completely voluntary choice to file those returns monthly.
Okay, great. David, thank you. I know we're running late. We've got 1 or 2 panelists. Sure. Hopefully you can stay for a little bit, but thank you. I also know that there are a whole host of other potential funds. You've spoken about the business loans that you can apply through your bank. I don't think those applications have opened yet. There's the Motsepe. We've spoken about the Rupert, which we think is closed. The Oppenheimer. There's Spaza Shop support funds. What we are going to be doing is posting up organizations that are able to assist you through the quagmire of all of the different funds. But to David Jaco and to David Warnicker, if you can stay, great. I know there are about 7 questions, but I do want to just get through the other panelists. Thanks very much for your time, and hopefully we'll see you at the end of the panel. We're going to move it on. I know there are about 7 or 8 questions sitting there. I do want to just get through the other panelists because we are running quite late. So Dan, if I can ask you to bring up Silna Steyn, who's been waiting patiently to talk about rentals, and I just saw that picture, Silna, flash up in your snazzy red dress, but I see there you are in your black polo neck on a evening in Johannesburg. Silna, I'm also going to Silna's from SSLR Incorporated, which are specialists in the rental part of the property market. I know we've had lots of queries over the weeks, and I know, Silna, even though you are more of a specialist on the landlord side, I did note that you were quoted in I think News 24 to say that the courts are going to look to the spirit of Ubuntu when they are ruling on disputes between lessors and lessees as a result of this lockdown and the impact it's had on tenants and lessees' ability to pay rent. So firstly, welcome and my apologies for the latest, number one. And number two, so tell me about, from both the lessor side and the lessee side, when you talk about the spirit of Ubuntu, what do you mean?
Yes, Herschel, thank you so much for having me. And seriously, no problem about running late. I don't think at this stage, anyway, hours or days count as they normally did. So really no problem. Thanks for having me. Herschel, yes, so Ubuntu is a very interesting topic in my head as an attorney. It is something that forms part of our legal system. And when I've made these comments to a journalist in News 24, and the reaction I saw today, I realized, oh my goodness, a lot of people really don't know that Ubuntu is an entrenched part of our law. So there's still a lot of different ways that the courts are approaching this and applying this. The appeal court specifically has a specific idea around Ubuntu when it comes to law of contract. But when it comes to an unprecedented situation like we are facing right now, what the principle of Ubuntu is all about is let's just be kind to each other. I get that doesn't sound like something that you would typically hear from a lawyer, but this is honestly, in a crisis like this, the only thing we really truly have to turn to is to be humane and consider the other party. So what we are saying and what we are advising is landlords and tenants must talk to each other and find middle ground. That is what our interpretation is at this stage, because the landlord that is not in a financial position to assist a tenant, to give him a payment holiday, a deferred payment, whatever the situation might be, the tenant that is now strictly relying on things like vis-mal or force majeure, it sounds like the same thing, yet it's really not, but it's close enough. We don't want tenants to just rely on those things, because that will kill the landlord financially. But at the same time, the landlord that is in a financial position to, for instance, again, apply to a bank for a payment holiday on his bond, or a landlord that doesn't have bonds, that does have a fully paid off portfolio. We would like to see those landlords talking to the tenants, allowing them deferred payments, payment holidays, so everybody can get through this situation without killing each other financially. I get the question. I'm, as you know, closely involved with most of the national groups of estate agents, and I get the question so often, who must carry this financial loss, the landlord or the tenant? And my answer is, every single person in the world will suffer financial loss as a result of this virus, not as a result of just the governments taking the necessary decisions to obviously save lives, but it's the virus that's causing financial loss, and we're going to share this, and we're going to feel the financial loss as each and every person in the world. It's a sad reality.
So let me ask you, so what would be the options? You're a tenant, and once again, not necessarily residential. I know that there are different issues with commercial property and retail tenants in shopping centers. Let's put that aside. You're a small business owner. You're battling. You're a tenant, a residential tenant. You're renting a house. You're renting an apartment. Salary's been reduced or salary's been cut. You can prove it. What are your options in terms of approaching your landlord?
Yes, so Herschel, just when the national state of disaster was declared, Michelle Dickens, the managing director of TPN, and I have had a very close relationship for years now, obviously working together in the same industry. And we had a discussion, what can we do? And we've put together a rent recovery pack. It's free of charge and it's available, click and download, no data collecting or anything, through the TPN system. Part of this recovery pack is a tenant income declaration form. And there's one for a juristic entity, one for a natural person. So my recommendation to a tenant is download the necessary form from the rent recovery pack, complete it, send it to your landlord and open a conversation. I have seen in the past few weeks that just sending a document doesn't help really, because everybody is flooded with everything. Pick up the phone and talk to your landlord, tell him what's going on, and find a way to make it work. The only sad reality is if the landlord isn't in a financial position, or unfortunately doesn't want to consider what we are all saying about Ubuntu and thinking about each other here, and if the landlord is simply refusing to give the tenant a rent holiday or a deferred payment, unfortunately, the tenant will then be deemed to be in breach if he doesn't pay his rent in full.
So let's have a look at the options. So you contact your landlord. Number one, it would be to ask for a discount if your landlord is in a position to give you some sort of discount, either in partially or in full. Number one. Two would be to defer. So to say to your landlord, I can pay a portion of my rent now, I can't pay any of my rent now, and to defer it. But once again, as we've heard with our previous guests with regard to SARS, you are going to have to catch that rent up if it is a deferment. So just to make sure that you aren't put under financial pressure over the remaining period of your lease. And if there aren't many months left, it is going to put you under a lot of pressure. The other option, which I understand, and just by the way, I think Dan, I did send you a link to those docs which are available for free. So if you can post up that link onto TPN, and there are all of the various documents that you can access there. The other option, which I understand is potentially available, is to approach your landlord about utilizing the deposit or part of the deposit towards that month's rent. But does that mean that you're then going to have to top up the deposit for the remaining period of the lease?
Yes, so every landlord-tenant relationship is unique. On the rental deferment agreement, we do make provision for the deferred payment portion to run even outside of the term of the lease agreement. And I do think it's very important for landlords and tenants alike to appreciate the risk that the landlord is taking by doing that, because obviously now your tenant can already move out to another property and he still owes you money. So as long as landlords understand that this is a potential risk, then it is a potential solution for a landlord. Say, for instance, there's only 2 months left on the lease agreement, but the rent is relatively high. It will take the tenant much longer to repay that. So part of the deferred agreement is an acknowledgement of debt. The deposit then is definitely an option in commercial and residential alike. Residential property obviously is governed by the Rental Housing Act. So Section 45C of the Rental Housing Act says that a landlord may request a deposit. So we are basing this deposit utilization on that premise, where we are saying, okay, the landlord initially said, I do want a deposit, but now I decide it's okay, you can have the money back, because remember, deposit money is always the tenant's money. So the tenant can have the money back, and the parties can then agree whether they want, the landlord would want the tenant to repay that deposit amount, or if they are only going to use a portion of the deposit. Say, for instance, they had a full month's rent deposit, or in some cases even 2, and they know at this stage the potential damage to the property won't exceed something, let's call it 2,000 Rand for argument's sake. They will keep that amount in the deposit, and the rest they will utilize then for rent, for utilities, whatever the need might be. But the truth is, as you rightly said, Herschel, be it a rent deferment payment or be it deposit utilization, at some stage, the tenant will, unless the landlord is really generous and really in a strong financial position, the tenant will have to repay that amount at some stage. And that could very well be pretty much close to impossible for a tenant that lost his job now. And at the same time, a landlord might struggle to recoup that money. So it is a risk that a landlord is taking to give a deferred payment or to use the deposit. I do, however, think as long as a landlord is really fully aware of the risk that he's taking and he understands that the deferred payment or the deposit utilization and the risk that he's taking could very well mean that he's not going to get the money back, and he's still comfortable with that, then do that. So don't squeeze yourself as a landlord, and you're going to suffer the financial loss to a position where you are basically really left with no money. Don't go that far in being nice. I'm all for accommodating each other, but as long as the landlord keeps that in mind when making these decisions.
Herschel, I know you're running short of time. Can we do a few very quick questions to Silna?
Howie, I want to just ask two quick things, Silna, just one word answers. So a lot of people in doing these agreements or deferments or deposit utilizations, there are agreements to be signed, but a lot of people don't have printing abilities to print and sign and scan and send back. So how do you legally agree if, for example, you can't print the document, you can't then sign it and then send it back, and your rental agreement says that unless reduced to writing, nothing outside of this rental agreement applies? How do you deal with that?
Yes, so none of this by legislation have to be in writing. So I'm very happy for the parties to send an email back and forth to say, I have read the full terms, I agree to the terms, I understand the terms. I can't sign because of whatever reason. I'm even happy with a WhatsApp message, as long as the parties can prove they've read the content, they've agreed to the content, even if they can't physically sign the agreement. I would be happy to prove that was the agreement between the parties.
And just quick last question, Howard, before we move on to yours. My understanding under the state of disaster or under the state of lockdown is that despite the fact that a tenant may not be able to pay rent, that the landlord won't agree, that the landlords in the current state are unable to initiate eviction proceedings. Is that correct?
It's 100% correct, and it's correct to the point where even our pending matters that was pre-lockdown, it is all stayed at this stage. There's a full moratorium at this stage on evictions regardless of property type. At the same time, people are not allowed to move, not even in level 4. We don't know. We're still waiting for formal regulations. So even the tenant that can't pay and want to move at this stage, unless there are different regulations, people are staying put, and with the moratorium on evictions, not even the sheriff will move people right now.
Howie, over to you.
Silna, there's so many questions. I hope you're staying behind afterwards to ask us some of them. Because you have nowhere else to go, let's face it. But a few quick questions. Is there any moratorium on rates and taxes, municipal rates and taxes at the moment?
No.
Okay, next question. Can you give notice of an intention to not renew a lease during this period?
Yes, you can. Remember, a lease agreement will terminate, and if it's governed by Section 14 of the CPA, he will automatically renew on a month-to-month basis. So that's what will happen to the majority of the lease agreements right now. You can give the notice that the lease agreement will terminate within 40 to 80 business days prior to the impending termination date. However, when we reach the termination date and we're still not there where we have regulations where we can have moving trucks going, where people are allowed to move, that tenant will remain in the premises and will have to pay holding over damages, which is exactly the same amount as rent.
So we have, for example, I've given notice that I plan on leaving at the end of my lease. My lease is up. I don't want to stay in the premises. I just can't physically move my things out. Must I continue to pay rent?
Definitely. It might not be rent, but it's the same amount, but we will then just call it holding over damages once the lease terminates or cancel, but it's the same amount. It's just lawyer, different words.
What happens if the lease is up and the tenant just isn't paying?
Well, if the lease is up and the tenant isn't paying and is still there, exactly the same position, tenant is liable to pay holding over damages. So the landlord will be entitled to reclaim that money from the tenant as soon as we can approach the courts again.
Someone says they want a legal opinion, not Ubuntu, but I think you've told us that Ubuntu is part of our legal system. But now that we're going into level 4 shutdown, but the tenant cannot attend at the office by legislation, is the tenant still liable for rent?
So that's a big question, and it actually has a pretty long answer. It depends on multiple factors. So if your lease agreement does allow for this mile where you really have intervening possibilities, so even if your lease agreement doesn't allow for that, intervening possibility is a common law provision, which you do have as a tenant. But the truth is, our president specifically said, guys, please, let's not enforce these things. And this is, unfortunately, I'm sorry, I'm bringing in the legal opinion based on Ubuntu. This is exactly where it's coming in. Even though you do have that right, it's similar to the landlord that does have the right to cancel the lease agreement at this stage because you can't pay rent. Similar, we need to meet each other halfway. So that the tenant that can't pay rent and that can't use the premises, he might have a right in law because of the impossibility to perform or the impossibility to use the premises. Whether the courts will accept all of this afterwards and how they will apply it, this is where Ubuntu comes in, and this is how we're going to see how the courts will apply this. So I know it's a long, difficult answer, and the reason why I'm struggling is it will depend on the specific lease agreement. So most commercial lease agreements look the same, but it is very specific.
Is this potentially force majeure because you can't pay because of this, and can you therefore cancel a lease agreement you no longer want to be party to?
100%, exactly to the question I just answered. Yes, it could very well be force majeure. Whether your lease agreement makes provision for it or not, there is common law at the back of force majeure as well. So yes, it can, but similar to my previous answer, how the courts will apply that, I must say, as a tenant, I would be reluctant to just rely solely on that.
And Hirsch, the last question before we move on to your final section of panelists, and then we'll come back to everyone, because they literally, I was counting up between my WhatsApps and the Q&As that we've had submitted. We are well over 200 questions that have been submitted already tonight. But Silne, if I can ask the last question before we continue with the panel. People have said we've spoken a lot about residential property, but or commercial property, but what about retail, particularly in places like shopping centers which are just not open? Can the landlord still charge rental in those conditions?
So the answer is exactly the same as commercial. The reason for that is obviously that the laws regulating commercial, retail, industrial is exactly the same. So I do appreciate that it's different for a lot of shopping center tenants, but the legal principle is the same. So you might be in a position to rely on this mile. However, how the courts will apply that, I would be a little reluctant to fully rely on that.
Thank you, Hirsch. Over back to you.
Thanks, Silne, and please stay on the line. It's obviously a hot topic. We're moving on to our last panelists, Benji and Paul. We've got a quick survey. We've got still quite a few participants hanging in there at 10:30. What best describes your opinion? It's time to get back to work now. The risk is minimal. It's time to slowly start opening business in a phased approach. A week or two more of stage 5 lockdown could solve the problem, or I'm simply not leaving my home until there's a vaccine or a cure. So let's see what our participants have to say. But Paul and Benji, if I could ask you to unmute, and we've got you live. Paul, bottom left of your screen. Great to have you on board, Paul. It's been a while. I'm not sure since when last I saw you, since we left Rosebank Primary School in 19 79, I think it was, but good to see you. Benji, great to have you. I'm sure many, let's have a look here. I think 2/3 are saying it's time to slowly start opening business in a phased approach. As to whether you think from stage 5 to stage 4 is a fast enough phase remains to be seen, but that's what the panelists have said. So let me just introduce our panelists. Benji, many of us will have heard you on High FM. I know that you have that you do a lot of fantastic work for the Zionist Federation. I think you've been recognized by the Zionist Federation for the work that you've done, not only for Israel, but for the Jewish community. And Paul, similarly, a serial entrepreneur, lots of successful businesses behind your name, and both of you are very involved now in one of your initiatives around how can the Jewish community better support itself and support Jewish businesses. And Benji, I'm gonna start with you. I think you've just muted yourself there. If you could go bottom left, just to unmute. Benji, you there? I'm not sure if I have lost traction there. Benji, it looks like I can see Paul moving up. Paul, let me go across to you. Paul, you've also, I picked up on a survey that you had sent out recently. I'm not sure if that's gone out to the community, specifically talking about whether does the Jewish community support businesses, whether they would, building up a directory. Maybe talk to me about this initiative, where it's going, and what you want to achieve with it.
Sure. Thank you. Thanks for the time, and thanks to you and Howard and Dan for putting this forum together. I think it's really the reverse of BE. In other words, that there's a real, I think, imperative right now that the community, all communities, try and get together and look at how they can collaborate and share resources in order to create real impact and enhance financial stability. So this survey is really to test the waters for putting together an app, a website that allows Jewish consumers to find Jewish businesses. You're looking for an attorney, a doctor, a plumber, whoever it is, there'll be a site that has got a proper, rating system in, so you can see the person's company, etc. It's got a track record, has got references, and you can then support the community. I am cognizant of the fact that I think Darkei Shalom is, reaching out, Tikkun Olam, whatever you want to call it. I think it's a big part of the Jewish community, has been, should be, hopefully always will be. So the goal is not just to keep this in the Jewish community, but to go to other common interest, loyal communities, niche communities. So I'm connected to some of the leadership in the Greek, Lebanese, the various Mediterranean communities that are locally, Portuguese community, Italian community, and to offer this site to them. So just very briefly, we've identified one of the top players in the space. We have had a number of meetings with the founder and CEO, and we are very close to getting an agreement on white labeling the site for the Jewish community. And then I want to take it to the other communities, because I just think that there's a real opportunity. People are much more eager to support each people they're close to, they feel connected to, they feel loyalty to, as in the Jewish community. I think there's an opportunity here to try and create more traction within the community.
And Paul, let me ask you, did this initiative start prior to this COVID and lockdown coincidentally, or did you start looking at this directly as a result of what the community and I guess other communities are going through as a result of COVID and the economic impact?
Yeah, so it's a good question. So Orchard started in 2005, and in 2006 and a half or 7, we launched Jet Pages, and that was set up to do the same kind of stuff, to try and put up a list of Jewish businesses and encourage people to support, the family, so to speak. It had some successes, but that was before the days of social media. It was before the days of app. It was before the days where 99% of the community was on the web and very, digitally, educated, etc. So I've had this in the back of my mind for quite a few years, and I've been trying to, find the right opportunity and the right timing. And this really just brought it all to the fore and encouraged me to. And then I spoke to a chap called Rabbi Meir Zayden, who's also, been playing along with the same line. So we've kind of like teamed up to try and promote this kind of idea.
And Paul, the response from the community in terms of its appetite, I know the community does to a large degree, I guess, support its own, certainly from community initiatives. What's the response been like in terms of willingness, propensity, and what are some of the key factors that people are saying, yes, we would, if this was, or these are the criteria we'd be looking at in order to better support the Jewish community?
Yeah, so I can tell you 500 people have responded so far to the survey, and it seems like there's a lot of positivity, but I'm only getting the results tomorrow. So unfortunately, I can tell you that, you've probably also seen the Kaplan survey, and it's interesting that 71% of the community support Jewish charities, or rather 71% of their spend goes towards Jewish charities. So that kind of encourages me to think that people are likely to want to support, assuming the person's competent, reliable, has got a track record, that they're willing to support the community. And I think that could significantly improve a person's, revenue line. If they get 20%, 30% more business because of this, that could be helpful.
Yeah. So Paul, where to next? So if people want to, and I already see there's some comments, doctors, professionals, whatever, artisans, what would be the next step? How would they get hold of you? How would they put their businesses forward onto your app or your Jewish business?
Right. So the last step is going to be tomorrow. We've actually got we're going through the user experience. The head of technology for this company is taking us through all the screens for if an end user jumps on to the platform, and if a consumer does, we want to be comfortable that it's going to be relevant and applicable to our community. And then hopefully we'll then start the process to implement it. But we're going to use social media. It's going to be Jewish Mommies, JJCF, all the WhatsApp groups. I think it'll be quite easy, the Jewish Report, etc. I'm sure you guys will be happy to promote it. I think this kind of thing, if it has got the support of the community and we're able to develop the user experience in a way that really is pleasing and simple and easy to use, I think it'll go like wildfire. And I think the community will get to know about it quite quickly through one of the various channels.
All right, brilliant. So we'll keep looking at the Jewish Report and all of the other apps and Jewish Mommies. We'll keep looking. So it's a fantastic initiative, and I'm sure there are a lot of businesses looking forward to putting their names forward. Benji, I can see you're blinking, which means that you are live and active. We've got a quick survey up. Would you be willing to support Jewish businesses, even if it meant changing from your current suppliers? So if you could just click on a yes or no, we'll pull those results up. Benji, as I was saying to you, you've been awarded and recognized for your support not only of Israel, but the Jewish community in South Africa. And from what I understand, if you can't get to and I hope I'm pronouncing this right, if you can't get to the Shuk in Jerusalem, you can now be part of iShuk. Am I getting that pronunciation right? So let's just have a look. So Paul, there's a really good barometer of what you can expect. 93% saying yes, they would be willing to support Jewish businesses, even if it meant changing current suppliers. So I hope.
By the way, I guess I do anticipate that it'll be easier to get residential homeowners to move than commercial businesses. Think about your business. You've got a procurement department. You've got certain kind of guidelines, BE requirements. It might be a lot more complicated in the commercial space.
Yeah, super. Benji, tell us how, if we can't get to the Shuk in Jerusalem, how we get to our Shuk. What does it do, and where did the idea come from? And talk to us about how we get involved, how we support it. What's it about?
Thanks, Herschel. Sorry about that earlier. I had a bit of a Cyril Mask moment. Basically, so I'm from the Zionist Federation. We're running it from that platform, along with Milan Media, who's helped to put it together. And basically what ishuk.co.za is, and people can go look at the site now, it's already live. is it's a way for companies to access cash flow now that they don't have access to their customers. So whether we're on lockdown 5 or moving to lockdown 4, a lot of Jewish businesses are not going to be able to access their customers. And so what we've done is create this platform, which is, I think, more of a short to medium term solution for people. And basically what you'll be able to do is customers will be able to go on from the community and purchase vouchers from businesses who've registered to come on. Obviously, they will have an iShook offering, which will make it attractive for customers to part with their cash in advance. And basically, you'll be able to be part of the process by buying these vouchers. It's completely free, both from the community perspective and the company perspective. We have a very basic and simple paperwork kind of thing that you have to fill in, so it's not difficult. And that's the idea. The idea has been very successfully run in a number of different industries in South Africa. We just sort of retrofitted it for the Jewish community. It's run quite well in the restaurant industry. We've also tried to make it easy for SMMEs. So as I say, the compliance is there, so we make sure you're a real business, but it's not onerous. And and we've already had support from ORT and from the South Africa Israel Chamber of Commerce, who both come on board to help get their people on. And it's going live in terms of the community at the end of this week for people who want to purchase. But if you're a business listening now, it's a really good opportunity to register for the site so that when it goes live, you can be there where people start wanting to purchase. And that's basically the idea.
And I see Dan gave us a quick demo. He's also posted up the website, https://ishook.co.za. So as a business, you've obviously got some criteria. What would be some of the key criteria that you need to meet in order to register your business on ishook.co.za?
So obviously designed for smaller businesses that can meet the requirements. The requirements are very simple. We need 2 references from people who know your business, whether the suppliers or customers or other people interact with your business. We need a couple of documents like your ID, your bank statements, and then you need to think about your iShook offering, right? What are you going to be giving to the public to ask them to part with their cash, whether that's a discount or something for free or 2-for-1 special or whatever it is. And that's it. That's pretty much it. We just check your credentials. We have a bit of a process. We'll get back to you in 48 hours, and then that's it. You're on the site and you're ready to trade.
And then, so if you go onto the site, you want to buy a meal or some sort of voucher. Just talk to me. How does the payment process work? Does the supplier or the vendor receive those funds immediately? And I guess there might be a question to say, is it guaranteed that in 2 or 3 months' time, potentially, let's talk about a restaurant as an example, that the supplier will honor that voucher that the member of the community has purchased?
So I think those are great questions. Thanks, Herschel. So 2 things. First of all, this is not your typical payment gateway. There's no credit card facilities. There's no snap scan, nothing like that. That's why we've been able to do it cheaply and quickly. And the Zionist Federation itself doesn't get involved at all in the purchase. So basically what happens is you will click on your purchase, you decide what voucher you want, and you'll get an email with the iShook order number on it. And then you will go and you'll get banking details as well on that email, and you will pay directly into the business that amount on the voucher using your iShook order number, and then the business will be able to see the iShook number when you bring in the email basically and redeem it with your proof of payment, if that makes sense. Now, obviously, there are no guarantees. We're dealing here with a crisis from an economic perspective, so we have no guarantees either from the community side, from the customer, or from the supplier that either will be around. But that's also the idea, is that we're not I don't think the idea here is not hundreds of thousands of rands or even tens of thousands, but we feel like people who want to spend 1,000 or a couple thousand or a few hundred on a meal voucher, whatever it is, that can be something that can keep a company afloat at a time like this.
Fantastic. And then who processed the application as a vendor? Does the Zionist Fed, have they got a team that's going to start processing the applications for vendors and suppliers that want to come onto your panel on iShook?
So the The checking of the credentials of the company is being done by a local Jewish firm called Payable, and they're helping us out with that, which we appreciate. And then our admin team at the Zionist Fed, that's our contribution to the process, is just to make sure that the minimal compliance is sorted out so that you get on the site. We're also allowing it as a tzedakah opportunity. So when you make a purchase, you can also do a donation to the South African Friends of Israel, who is helping out supporters of Israel in the townships as part of the process as well. So that element is in as well.
Herschel, we can't allow Benji to be on and not mention the fact that it's Yom Ha'atzmaut, Israel's Independence Day, 71 years of having 72 years, forgive me, my maths is terrible, 72 years of Israel's independence. Benji, you do have some great celebrations online tomorrow. Can you tell us just a little about that? Because I'm sure there's so many people who will want to participate. We can't go out and have a physical function, but we can certainly be there virtually with you.
So Howie, there's so much going on, and I would really encourage people to go to our website, which is www.SAZionFed.co.za, and you can have a look at all of the offerings. My personal favorite, we have an Israel quiz coming up, which Howie is international, but I'm pretty sure won't be as good as yours. And we also have, which is very cool, Hanoch Piven, who is a world famous Israeli artist, and he makes portraits out of bananas and 3D objects that you find around the house. And he's going to be doing his own personalized to South Africa with your kids session, where you'll be able to make a portrait with a 3D object in your house. So yeah, I would really encourage people to make sure that you go and have a look at that. It's all on the website. The Zionist Fed has one giant portal where you can do that. It's on SA Zion Fed. And we've had some really good reactions from the community to some of the stuff connecting to Israel. You know, the Israel at home, whether it was Yom HaZikaron or Yom Ha'atzmaut. So yeah, thank you for that, Howie. I really appreciate it.
Herschel, I know we've been going for 2 hours and 45 minutes, which is a lot longer than we expected to. And there are so many questions for so many panelists that I think after you thank them and bring this to a formal close, many of the panelists are going to come back. But I do want to remind people that you and I both sit as non-executive directors of the SA Jewish Report. It is a newspaper that is read by 55,000 members of our community here and overseas, both online and in print edition. While we don't get paid for that or any of these panels, we do provide a remarkable a service to our community. And we do have staff. We have editors and CEOs and salespeople and journalists and printing costs and distribution costs, and all of that costs money. And therefore, we are asking the population out there, the tens of thousands of people that have been watching these panels, the 55,000 people who read the newspaper every week, be they in South Africa or overseas, because we've got about 15,000 people overseas who read our newspaper every week, ex-South Africans who've immigrated. This is the time for you to show some appreciation for our staff who put together a remarkable newspaper, probably the best quality Jewish newspaper anywhere in the world. And so, Hirsch, as we bring all of the panelists back onto the panel so you can thank them and formally close, I would just like to, while we do that, play you a short video about how you can help the Jewish Report during this time period.
Thanks, Howie.
Hi, I'm Howard Sackstein, chairman of the South African Jewish Report. And we at the Jewish Report believe that Jewish organizations would be made or broken by how they serve their community during this impossibly difficult time. Our first decision was to continue to publish and to deliver newspapers not just to shops, but to people's townhouses and apartment blocks as well. Because feeling part of a community is one of the greatest services we could ever deliver to the Jews of South Africa. Our second decision was to create a platform for information, education, and entertainment for the entire Jewish community and for South Africa as a whole. Over the past few weeks, we have created Zoom panels that have attracted tens of thousands of viewers. Some of the best healthcare specialists in South Africa gave practical advice on how to stay safe during Corona. Psychologists taught people how to stay sane, and wellness experts made sure that our minds and bodies were kept fit and healthy. One of the things we are most proud of is how we have highlighted the work done by so many Jews and Jewish organizations in feeding the needy and producing masks for both our own community as well as the townships. But now we at the Jewish Report face our own challenges to survive as advertising dries up. And so we are appealing to you. If you are one of our 55,000 readers, or if you are amongst the tens of thousands of people who have enjoyed our Zoom panels, now we at the Jewish Report are asking for your support. Please give generously to us so we can continue to publish and continue to serve you in this remarkable fashion.
So Herschel, people can go onto our website, sajr.co.za, and get our banking details. Or alternatively, if they have Zapper on their phone, they can just zap that 3D barcode that you see now. Or you can go into WalletDoc. In fact, www.walletdoc.com/pay/SAJR. And please, we're appealing to everyone to please make a donation. Help us keep our community together during this impossibly difficult time.
Thanks so much. And just to echo those sentiments and to the entire Jewish Report board, led by your amazing efforts over the last month to provide this community with so much, and to our panelists tonight. So we are long overdue. But there was so much interesting information, such a critical part of the pressures that we feel, not only for our health, but in terms of our financial wellness. So thank you to all of our amazing panelists, some of who are still here: Silna, Larry, Helene, Benji, David, I see you're still up there, Paul, Errol, Dan, David Bass is there, Yako, Nell is there, Hugh. Thank you so much, Dan, as always, our miracle maker, who's able to coordinate, post, link, share, pull up, pull down panelists. You've been absolutely amazing. And to all of our participants for hanging in there so late. I hope you've got some real benefit. I've loved hosting the show. I hope you've got some benefit. Howie, I'm going to hand over to you in terms of, as you said, we've got hundreds of questions. How do you want to play them? I know we're kind of heading to 11 o'clock.
So Herschel, there are a lot of questions. I know we didn't hear from Yaku as well, but we didn't get to ask David and Yaku some questions, and there's a myriad of questions that have come on. And I think maybe I can ask the three of them if there's any simple to understand document that you can give us to help share with people the difference between UIF, the difference between UIF and TERS, and how do people apply? Is there some document, Yaku, that maybe you have that you can share with us?
Yeah, we actually do have a document which we can share. You can just tell us how you want us to share it, and we can share that tomorrow. Fantastic, thank you. We will, in fact, email everyone who registered for tonight out tomorrow with everyone's contact details, whatever resources or information that people require, we'll email out. There are some very specific questions. For example, what percentage does TERS or UIF pay? I don't know if David or Yaku want to take that question.
Sorry, what do you mean by what percentage do they pay?
What percentage can you actually get of your salary?
See, that depends on the UIF tables, so they would have to apply to find out, but it's capped at 17,700 and the minimum payment is 3,500.
Okay.
I think Howie, just the clarity there, which I think David alluded to, and I think that's caught a lot of people, is that people have paid a portion of salary, and David, correct me if I'm, people have paid a portion of salary and then applied to TERS for a top-up, and often those top-ups have been rejected as opposed to relying on TERS for the basic element of of payment and then using salary to top up. And so David and Yaka, I hope your document alludes to actually how you should structure that application. Am I correct?
We can include that in the document. Currently, the document basically clarifies the process and the threshold for eligibility. But we can include that in the document.
Cool. Yeah, because there've been a number of questions from people to say they have domestic workers who are not on UIF or staff not on UIF. Is it too late to put them on now?
I would think it's too late, unless there's something else that comes out in the new regulations. I think it will be rejected.
There was a question: if you earn more than 17,500 Rand a month, can you still apply for TERS?
No, yes,
you can. I think, yeah, you can. I think we must just clarify that the 17,500 Rand is spread over 3 months.
Okay. Sorry, won't you just clarify that? What does that mean?
It means although the maximum is 17,500 Rand, it is spread over 3 months. So that is the maximum you can that you can receive over a 3 months period.
Okay.
Is that per employee? So is that effectively just under 6,000 Rand per employee per month, or is it 17 per month per employee?
No, it's 6,000 some odd, 500, 700 per employee.
Per month.
Sure. Next question, does it apply to domestic workers as well if they're on UIF?
Yes, it does.
Okay, David Bass, next one. People are saying they've applied, but they have legal foreign workers who have been employed by them, who all have work permits, but they're only getting paid for their South African ID numbers.
According to the UIF commissioner in a press conference yesterday, he did confirm that everyone will be paid. Our clients who have gotten feedback have typically been asked to fill out a U19 form in addition for those applicants. So it's very important that they follow the advice with their applications. So when an application is rejected, they will get advice from the UIF of what documents they need to complete to comply.
Okay. For Larry Dave, a question. Can you, as circumstances have changed, can you in fact change someone's employment contract during this period?
It depends what part of the contract of employment. I mean, I would imagine they're referring to a salary payment. And as I alluded to earlier, that is possible in these unique circumstances.
Okay. Larry, next question.
Let me just ask this. So, Larry, is that on a temporary basis, or are you entitled to change a person's terms of employment on a permanent basis?
It would be temporary. It would be in response to the lockdown, but I don't believe an employer would be able to justify doing it permanently, especially if the business gets back on its feet.
Okay. Larry, next question for you. Someone says, if I need to retrench employees now, but I can't afford their full retrenchment, can I in fact pay a retrenchment package over time?
Yeah, it can be negotiated with the employee. The employee would have very little choice in that, provided the employer can show that it is financially strapped.
Okay, cool. Question for David Bass. David, who must apply for the TERS? Is it the employer or the employee?
If an employer employs more than 10 employees, then the employer must apply. If they employ less than 10 employees, then the employee can apply, or the employer.
Okay, cool. Then questions for David Wanaka. Let me just unmute you there for a second. We've had a few questions from people who have tax due, I think probably at the end of May, either provisional tax or assessed tax. Is there any way, if you've been assessed and you have to pay your assessment by the end of May 2019, this is from 2019, is there any way to defer that payment of tax if you've already been assessed?
Well, in the explanatory statement that was issued the other day, it was indicated that businesses apply if they were having cash flow difficulties.
Oh, sorry, Dave,
So
you just froze there for a
when there's
second. Can you just repeat that? You just froze there for a second.
Oh, I see. There was an explanatory statement that was issued the other day that indicated that businesses would be able to apply for a deferral of payment, and it would be considered on a case by.
Okay, Dave, I'm so sorry, but it looks like we've lost you. It looks like we've lost you there again. If you do come back, there was a question. There was a question. Oh no, I'm afraid we've lost connection to David there. There was also a question, Dave. I see you back for a second. We lost you there, so maybe you can very, very quickly try to repeat yourself.
Okay, my understanding is it's not cast in stone because we're waiting for the bill, but it was indicated that on a case-by-case basis, taxpayers could apply for deferral of payment.
Even if it's related to taxation assessed from a previous non-COVID related period.
It wasn't very specific in terms of exactly what the deferral would have to relate to. I think that my assessment of the release was that it would obviously have to have been triggered as a result of COVID-19. That must be the important criterion, and one must have to demonstrate. One must be able to demonstrate that the non-payment, the lack of ability to pay, is directly as a result of COVID-19. But we'll have to see when on Thursday, hopefully it will be clarified.
David, last question for you. There was a question about VAT. Is there any relief that people have on when their VAT is due?
No, not specifically on VAT, but this would also fall into what I said in the previous question answer, that one could apply on a case-by-case basis, but there's no specific relief from VAT other than allowing vendors who not on a monthly basis to claim inputs on a monthly basis for these 4 months. That's the only specific VAT relief that was given.
Okay. David Bass, if people want to apply for UIF online, is that a possibility? Is there a website that people can go to?
Yes, so if they go to the Department of Labour website, the link to apply UIF is there. And all that they'll need to do is click on the far left. There is a tab that says COVID-19 claims.
Okay. Herschel, it has been impossible. We've had, I think it's something like 230 questions, some of them enormously technical, that have come in tonight. But I want to thank you for chairing a remarkable panel. There's obviously so much stuff that we couldn't get to, but wow, to be able to have this level of expertise and so many people who are able to give advice, whether it was in property or labor law or tax or innovative entrepreneurial solutions or how to employ people. And so fantastic to see so many members of our community trying to help our community, whether it's through vouchers or training or loans through the Rambam Trust. It is just so remarkable and so heartwarming to see all of this. So Herschel, to you for chairing tonight's panel, a huge thank you from all of us. To Dan Stillerman, the engine that makes all of this tick and run. He is the oil to all of us, and to all our panelists tonight. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. We will, anything that you send on our WhatsApp group tonight about information, links, contact details, anything that you can do, Dan will send out to everyone who registered for tonight an email with all those resources tomorrow. These are enormously difficult times for everyone, But I think the fact that people like you gave of your time tonight to try help everyone out there in our community is really so heartwarming, and for that we are enormously grateful. So we're not going to end this yet, although we're going to stop talking. Well, I've got a few WhatsApps from people saying, please can you give us the banking details of the Jewish Report again, or how we can contribute money. So Dan, if you don't mind, I'm going to share a slide with everyone over here as we say goodnight to everyone, and we'll leave it up for the next 5 minutes so people will be able to access and be able to make a donation.
Yeah,
So
even easier, I've posted both of those in the chat. So the banking details and the wallet doc link, which is clickable as well.
Fantastic. That's absolutely amazing. So to everyone tonight, thank you so much. Really appreciate all of your efforts. We'll be back with another Jewish Report panel probably a little later in the week. Good night to you all, and thanks once again.
Thanks so much, people. Stay safe.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Thanks, bye bye.
Bye.
Stay safe and sanitized, as we've been saying.
Thank you. Good night.
Cheers, guys. Dan, thanks so much. Howie, we'll touch base in the morning. Benji, thank you. Well,
cheers, guys. Cheers.
Cheers, Dan.
Thanks so much, guys. I really appreciate it. Well done. It was excellent.
Thanks, guys.